Hello and welcome to the Cloud Strategies and Solutions Megacast event. Thank you so much for joining us on this Megacast. This event is produced by ActualTech Media, and on this event you'll hear from experts at Nutanix, Veeam, Rubrik, Druva, SolarWinds, and OutSystem. We've got a great event lined up for you today. Thank you to everyone out there in the audience. We've got hundreds of IT professionals from across the United States and around the world joining us on today's event. If you haven't been on a Megacast before, you should know that we at ActualTech Media created the Megacast and EcoCast event series. We're all former IT professionals ourselves, and we created this event series to help educate IT professionals out there in the world about the latest and greatest in enterprise technology to help you do it quickly and efficiently from your office or your home office these days, and to get all your questions answered. We know that IT can be challenging, and sometimes you can feel like you're alone out there. It's tough to find answers to challenges that are happening every day. And so this is the place, hopefully, that you can learn about what's new, what's innovative, and to get your technical challenges solved. So thank you so much for being on the event. Before we jump into it, there's just a few things that you should know about the event. The Megacast has a questions tab there. It's on the left-hand side. Many of you have already found it. I enjoy seeing all the good morning and hello messages from just every city in the United States and every city around the world. It's really incredible to see the hundreds of hello and good morning messages. So thank you for those. Of course, we also encourage your technical questions because I'll be doing dedicated Q&A sessions with each of today's expert presenters. So post your toughest technology challenge in the questions box. I'll queue those up for the Q&A sessions after each of the presentations. I'll also have a few poll questions for you out there in the audience. So, of course, we appreciate your participation in those. We want this to be a social event. There's a Twitter icon on the bottom of the screen. You can tweet directly from the console without leaving the event and going off to the Twitter webpage. And the hashtag for the event, which is ATM Megacast, will be automatically appended. We'll be doing our best to monitor social media, monitor that hashtag throughout the event, and of course we appreciate you helping to spread the word about what we're doing here with the Megacast. You can also access social media pages for ActualTech Media on the top right-hand side of your console there. You'll find our YouTube homepage where you'll find recordings of pretty much every single event that we run, our Twitter homepage, and of course LinkedIn as well. We also have a number of handouts there on the left-hand side of your audience console. We have PDF resources, ebooks, and links from every presenter that's on the event today. I can call your attention to it that way. Hope that you'll download those resources now or check those out now and peruse them after the event. And then finally, this is a Megacast, and we like to say that we have mega prizes on the event. We will be giving out 5 Microsoft Surface Pro 7 hybrid tablets. These are awesome new Surface Pro 7s, as well as, not to diminish this prize in any way because it's super valuable, an Amazon $500 gift card after every presentation, roughly every 30 minutes on the event today. So that's a lot of gift cards. That's a lot of Microsoft Surface Pros. You must be live in attendance to qualify for the prize drawings. There are a number of other legalese prize terms and conditions that you might want to be aware of. You can find those in the handouts tab under ATM prize terms, and full details are on our website. All prize winners must submit an IRS Form W-9 to ActualTech Media. We'll reach out to prize winners after the event. And then you should also know that we support charities through the Megacast and EcoCast event series. As of late, we've been supporting the Diane Fossey Gorilla Fund and One Tree Planted in partnership with the Gorilla Guide Book Club. You can go to gorilla.guide and download full-length educational ebooks. These aren't marketing promos. They are very educational ebooks. They're all completely free. Download as many as you like. Read them on your iPad or tablet, and hope that you'll check those resources out over at gorilla.guide. As I mentioned, the hashtag for today is ATM Megacast. I'll be monitoring that over on Twitter. You can follow ActualTech Media and me as well, David M. Davis. Subscribe to all the ActualTech media channels. As I mentioned, top right-hand side of your console, YouTube, Facebook, and the 10 on Tech podcast that we produce. And we post all of our latest and greatest content over on LinkedIn. So if you just pick one, make sure that you check us out there. Now, before I jump into it with our first presenter here and introduce our presenter from Veeam, I've got just a little bit of stage setting or introduction to cover today, as well as a couple of poll questions for you out there in the audience, and I'll share the results of those polls with you. So, first off, let's talk about today's topic. We're talking about cloud strategies and cloud solutions. If you're moving to the cloud, you've got to have some kind of strategy. Don't just jump into it. Don't just go out there and start spinning up EC2 instances and moving data. You need to really think about it. And first, I think the first step of that is to take a step back and ask yourself, why cloud? Why are we interested in cloud to begin with? And the answer at most companies is that traditional legacy infrastructure in many ways is inefficient, complex, costly, and increasingly just not meeting the needs of the business. But that doesn't mean we're just going to throw out the whole data center and replace it with a basketball court, right? We're going to intelligently leverage cloud, use cloud where it makes sense for our business, and use the on-premises data center where it makes sense for our business as well, and maybe connect the two together and create kind of this hybrid cloud where we can leverage the services of the public cloud along with the maybe applications that are running on premises in our data center, and kind of have the best of both worlds. That's what I see most companies doing today. So cloud of course helps with efficiency and agility for the business. We don't have to wait to spec out a server and order it and rack it and stack it and cable it up and do all these things we traditionally had to do. We can instantly spin up an instance. We can have this kind of infinite scalability out there. And with say a cloud formation template on EC2, we could spin up 100 or 1,000 instances anytime we want. And it's all pay-as-you-go pricing, which is good, and bad, of course. You pay for what you consume, but in many cases, it's hard to estimate what you will consume, and it's kind of hard sometimes to know exactly what that bill might be at the end of the month. So this OpEx model is appealing, to many financial experts at most companies, but it can also be scary in some ways. But the benefit here, of course, is that this will allow the IT organization to better focus on the business and the applications. But there's a lot of confusion around cloud. There's multiple forms of cloud, and public, private, hybrid, multi-cloud, enterprise cloud. The marketing folks have gotten a hold of this term cloud, and they've just twisted it around into a whole bundle of services that it's really hard to understand exactly sometimes. SaaS and PaaS and IaaS and DRaaS and backup as a service. So there's also a lot of differences between cloud offerings. If you run an instance in EC2, that's different than running a virtual machine over in Azure. Even though the concepts are the same, the formats are different, the administration is different, the API is different. There's a lot of incompatibilities between from cloud to cloud and cloud to on-premises and moving from cloud back to on-premises. There's also differences in management models between on and off-premises, difference in cost models from cloud to cloud. And in my opinion, that's why I believe this event is so important. As I said at the start, I hope to help you. These expert presenters hope to help you clear up confusion when it comes to cloud, get your questions answered, help to make you and your company more efficient in IT, help to save your company money and time, and help you and your company to be more agile and competitive. And so many of us out there are being forced in IT to do more with less. And I think cloud is one of the kind of tools that we have on our Batman tool belt to help us to actually do that, to be more efficient, to be more agile, and to actually do more with less. Cloud might be the secret sauce that we could add to make that possible. So we're here to help and get all your questions answered, solve your challenges. And so let me pose this poll question to you. out there, and that is why cloud for you and your company? What is it that makes you interested in cloud? And this is a multi-select question, so you don't have to just select one. Feel free to select multiple, and I will share the results of this poll with you, and you can kind of see how you stack up with your peers on the event today. So I'll give you a moment to answer that poll. If you haven't done it, if you haven't answered polls before, just do it right there in the slides window. Just click on the option or options that correspond to you. And I should mention the last option there is other technology not listed. Drop it in the questions box. So if there's something that is appealing to cloud, or something about cloud that's appealing to you, but it's not on the list, I want to improve this poll. I want to share your vote with the audience out here. So drop it in the questions box, and I will share that. Let's see. Andy said scalability and efficiency is key. Absolutely. Salil said actually cloud apps are very expensive. You're absolutely right. They can be. Let's see. Catherine said because vendors are forcing us to, their applications are moving to the cloud. Very true. Yeah, in many cases. Good feedback. Thank you. If you have any trouble viewing the poll question, just push refresh on your web browser. And I should mention that 99% of the time that will resolve any trouble on the event today. Refresh on your web browser, Chrome or Firefox or the recommended web browsers. And an incognito or private browsing session might help some folks that have any sort of technical difficulties. A great question coming in from James. Are there any baby steps that we can kind of take, or a baby step approach to engaging in cloud services, use cases, or lessons learned? Great feedback. I can pose that to our presenters today. Marco said portability, support people with different needs. Andy said getting help from the cloud or cloud services, or maybe he just needs help. I will respond to you, Andy. Thank you for that feedback. So again, thank you everyone out there. Let me share the results of this. We had hundreds and hundreds of responses. Looks like 57% said efficiency, 50% said business agility, and 45% said improved data protection and disaster recovery. So great feedback. Cost savings and infinite scalability are kind of down there on the list at 38%. One final poll question before I introduce you to our first presenter, and that is on your screen. What's your time frame for adding new or updating existing IT solutions at your company? Primarily today we're talking about cloud solutions of some kind, but it could be data protection and disaster recovery solutions, that are leveraging cloud, hybrid cloud technologies like you'll learn about, from Nutanix, data protection and disaster recovery like you'll learn about from Rubrik and Druva, and so much more on the event today. Lots of really cool content coming up. So thank you everyone who responded to the poll there on the screen. We do appreciate that. It's time to kick off today's Megacast. I'm excited to introduce our first presenter, welcoming Mr. James Brannon, Enterprise Systems Engineer at Veeam. James, are you there?
I am here, David. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for being on. Take it away.
Thank you. So as David said, my name is James Brannon. I'm an Enterprise System Engineer here at Veeam. I've been here for a little over 3 years now, working with both commercial customers and enterprise customers. So I've had customers as small as 250 seats that they have all the way up to 35, 40,000. I have one customer that's a little over 100,000 seats. So, very complex environments in every one of those. And a lot of them have we're moving to the cloud, we're moving to a hybrid environment, and we're wanting to know how can Veeam help us back that up. So today we're going to talk about some of our solutions where we back up AWS and Azure. Yesterday, some of you might have seen in announcements and things of that nature, we actually also are adding Google towards the end of this year. So we're going to have basically the 3 major players in the cloud that we're going to be able to back up natively. So a lot of customers ask, what is Veeam? What do you guys actually do? I heard of Veeam about 12, 15 years ago, and it was all virtual. It's around VMware. Well, that is true. We started in the virtual world, but we are a platform that helps you with your cloud, whether it's on-prem, the private cloud or a public cloud. your virtual environment, and we don't care what kind of virtual environment, we've got a way to back up a lot of different virtual environments, but the major three that we play with are VMware, Hyper-V, AHV. Those are the ones that we see in most of our customers, so we've got native integrations, but when it comes to some of the others, we've got ways to play with them. Physical environments, a few years ago, about 5, maybe 6 years ago, we started playing with physical because so many customers still had that physical environment. And then we started going into the SaaS and the cloud world over the past 3-4 years. Now, when we look at how do we actually play in all those, when virtual, as I said, VMware, Hyper-V, AHV, physical, we don't care if it's Oracle, AIX, Linux, Windows. SaaS solutions like Office 365, OneDrive, we're backing those up for customers. Cloud, as I said, Azure and AWS we're talking about today, but we also could do IBM Cloud, and Google is coming in the near future. And one of the nice things that we do down at the bottom, you notice it talks about the universal storage APIs. If you are on-prem or you're wanting to back up to on-prem, we play with every kind of vendor that's out there. We don't lock you into any kind of storage. We'll use what you have, or we'll help you work with some of the new storage vendors to make sure that you can back up. We also have integration into a lot of the object storage. So AWS S3, you're taking your on-prem and you're trying to get it out to the cloud, and you're worried about also, can I take my cloud backups and get those to object storage? We're able to back up and get them into that object storage environment. Why do we need a backup still? A lot of customers, when I'm talking to them, they kind of have that question of, why do I have to have a backup? I'm taking it out to the cloud for a reason. And one of the big things with cloud is I have redundancy. I've got that geo redundancy. It's in 3 or 4 different data centers, or it's in data centers in the US and in the UK, or somewhere in Europe, or maybe even in Asia Pac. Why do I have to have a backup? Well, all your backup vendors actually come out and tell you that it's your responsibility for your data. Every one of them tell you that you're in charge of your data. So if you get hit with ransomware inside of AWS or inside of Microsoft Azure, that ransomware, when it populates through your servers out there, those providers are not going to restore your data for you. They're not going to go in and have a backup that they're going to pull all your data out and put it back into those environments. They're actually going to tell you that, we'll do best effort if we can. We'll try to get something for you, but they don't guarantee any SLA on when they're going to get it for you. They don't guarantee that they are going to get it for you. And I've had customers that have had this happen where, it was in Azure. Microsoft did best effort that they could do, but it was 2-3 weeks before they were restoring any data, before they were getting any of that data back. And when you're taking it to cloud and you want it up and running 24/7, 365, and you want to know it's reliable, you need to have your own backups. And you can see in this chart what the vendors are actually telling you. So I'm going to start off with a little bit more around AWS, but we're going to talk about both AWS and Azure. And when we talk about both of them, Veeam has the ability to back up that cloud, AWS, Azure, natively without having to install any agents on any of the VMs you have running out there. We also have what we call our cloud tier. That's where inside of our solution, you can tier your backup data into the cloud. So you can back it up on-prem as first place to back it up, or I can back it up to the cloud first and then bring it on-prem as a secondary. But we give you that cloud tier for the ability to have a second copy of your data off-site. We recommend always the 3-2-1 rule: 3 copies of your data, 2 different locations or 2 different media, and 1 off-site kind of thing. So by having that cloud tier, that gives you your 2 media and also gives you that 1 off-site. We also have the ability, as I said, to back up Office 365, and that can be taken and leveraged to that same cloud tier kind of feel. So I could take it to an Amazon S3. I can take it to Blob storage that's running in Azure if I want to keep it in Microsoft data centers. Or, as I mentioned, we're adding Google at the end of this year. And so you're going to be able to take it to Google Cloud if you wanted to and back up the data into Google Cloud environment. We also have, if you're in a hybrid setup today, or you have no cloud at all and you have on-prem, we have the ability to directly restore any of our backups right into AWS or Azure. So you can right-click on a backup file and say, I want to restore this out to the cloud. And you pick which cloud, you pick which size VM you want to run it on in the cloud, and we do the full restore into the cloud. So we actually give you the ability to use us like a migration tool to migrate your data back out into the cloud, test it, make sure it's good, that it's going to work out there, and then take your last backup from on-prem and restore all that data into that VM that's running out there. So that way you're sure to be able to have last night's data or most recent data out in the cloud. So as I said, I'll start with AWS. And when we talk about AWS, we like to make sure that we're cloud native. We're cost effective for you because that's a big thing with a lot of our customers is it's expensive to run first your applications in the cloud, but then also to talk about, okay, now I've got to back it up in the cloud. That's going to be even more expensive. I have to incur as an OpEx that I might not have in my budget. Make sure it's secure. Ransomware is a huge thing that hits a lot of customers, and we want to make sure that your data is secure in a way that if ransomware was to come through, you could still restore. And then cloud mobility. With us, as I said before, you can actually use the backup files to move them into AWS. You can also say, I back up an AWS instance and restore it to Azure, or vice versa. So, we're able to move from cloud to cloud based on what you want to do. As I mentioned, cloud native, we're integrated into Amazon and their EBS snapshots to make sure that we can do backups straight out of the EBS snapshot. So there's no agent installed. And then with that backup that you've got, you can take it off to S3 for your longer term retention. Or you could say, I want to bring it back to my on-prem environment and have it stored as my on-prem so it's off-site from AWS in case AWS goes down, and you can bring it back on-site. The only thing is when you bring it back on-site, I normally recommend like once a month or something of that nature for that on-site, because you do incur the egress charges to bring it back on-site when you do backups out of AWS or Azure back to on-prem. Cost effective is also, as I said, one of our biggest things. And what's kind of nice is, with Veeam, we don't care where you're taking the data, where you're backing it up to, but we're going to give you all the information that we can to make sure that you know how much it's going to cost. So when you're going through Veeam's, what we call our policies, that's a backup job. When you're creating those out, that policy actually in the top right will tell you how much is it going to cost to store that backup inside of the solution that you're looking at, so AWS or Azure or in the future Google. And so we're making sure okay, I've got this policy that has these 10 servers. It's going to cost me $30 a month to back those up. We're making sure you know that ahead of time so you can look at, okay, the number of backups that I'm creating or the snapshots I'm putting in place throughout the month. Do I need that many snapshots? Do I need to snapshot this every hour, like we used to on-prem, or could I go to every 4 hours and bring that cost down? So you're getting that notice to know how can I make sure I've got good control over my cost. Also, we're very flexible on how you license Veeam. Veeam does have a free version. I will tell you it only allows you to do 10 VMs inside of either the cloud Azure or AWS, but we do have a free version that you can go out and you can play with and actually test things and see if it does what you want it to do. Then you can do a pay for what you use inside of AWS. So you basically are paying back to AWS right out of the marketplace for how many you're actually backing up. And then our last is bring your own license. We'll allow you to take licenses that you're using on-prem and actually migrate those into the cloud. So we have the way that you can start backing up on-prem, and then as you move to the cloud, you just take your licenses with you out there into the cloud. And then, as I said, security is one of our biggest things, and we make sure that the way that we back up the data, it's actually isolated from both your on-prem and your AWS environment. So that way, if ransomware was to attack, there's no way that it's actually going to see our backups and be able to encrypt those, because that's one of the big things that ransomware likes to do today. So what's the architecture look like? It's actually a very simplistic architecture. As I mentioned, we're in the AWS marketplace. You just go out to AWS marketplace, you say you want to use us, it spins up an actual little server that's running inside your AWS environment. You create a backup account, and you're ready to go, leveraging us to back up from those EBS snapshots. It's as simple as that. Next thing all you have to do is create your policies to say, okay, here are the snapshots of the actual EC2 instances that I want to back up. As I mentioned, there's a little web UI down here at the bottom that talks about the cost estimation and gives you all that information. And then you basically determine, do I want to store the data in where the EBS snapshots are at and in that storage? Or do I want to offload those to like an S3? Do I want to offload those to on-prem? Or do I even want to offload them to another cloud solution? So you might say, I want to take the data out of AWS and I want to back it up to blob storage inside of Azure or to storage that's inside Google that's coming later this year. So you got the ability to take that data to another location. Azure, when we talk about Azure, a lot of it is the same kind of thing, but it is a little bit different. They are two different environments. So with Azure, again, we are in the marketplace for Azure, so you're able to have that rapid deployment. You're able to click on it and say, I want to use Veeam inside of Azure. And within 5 minutes, you've got the server built out. You've got some of the stuff ready to go, and all you have to do is start creating your policies and tell it where you want the data to be stored at. So under 20 minutes, you probably have everything up and running. It is an agentless backup again, just like AWS was. We do not require you to install an agent into any of your VMs because we're taking it at the snapshot level from inside of Azure. You can create automation on your backups and your retention policies to allow it to be less hands-on. Basically, automate your data, automate your backups, make sure it's efficient, and make sure that somebody isn't having to sit there and babysit what's going on in your environment for that. We also want to make sure in Azure that it's fast and flexible for recovery. So you have the ability to do a full VM restore all the way down to brick level, file level restore. So I can go into any of the backups and say, I want this specific text file to be restored, and we're going to restore that text file to where you want to restore it. So it can go back into that original VM, or you can actually say, I want to restore that text file to my local desktop. I need it for a couple other servers I want to push it out to, and you can pull it back down into the local desktop if you wanted to. So it's very flexible on where it's going. We also, again, optimize the cloud cost to make sure that it's very cost effective for you to be running in that cloud. We also want to make it the lowest cost for retention. So a lot of times we take those snapshots, and instead of storing them where Azure stores the snapshots, we actually like to write them to blob storage. So that way you have a cheaper long-term retention and be able to keep them for years if you need to. We also, again, have that increased security and a layer of defense to make sure that your data is safe and secure from any kind of cyber attack. And you can leverage multi-factor authentication if you need to, or a two-step portability. So that's back to that cloud mobility. We can recover and migrate any of your data anywhere you want to. So it could be back in Azure, it could be back to on-prem, or it can be to another cloud solution. And then the instant recovery of your data anywhere at any time. So architecture of Azure is actually very simplistic, but also a lot like the AWS. You go into Marketplace, you spin it out just like you did in AWS. You'll have a backup server that's running, and with that, you'll have what's called our workers. The workers are the movers of the data. They're the ones that are going out and saying, I need to grab these snapshots, and I now need to move them over to the blob storage. So, or I need to grab these snapshots and this data, and I want to write it to on-prem, or I want to write it to AWS or Google Cloud, wherever it may be. Those workers are the movers. They're the ones that are going to go out and run and move some stuff. So it's very simplistic where we see the VMs, we see the Azure disks, and we see the snapshots. We're going to grab from the snapshots because that actually takes the workload off then of your VMs and the disks themselves. And we just go up and run. And last slide that I have here is, we restore to another cloud. As I said, with us, it's very easy to restore. And it doesn't matter if we're talking about Azure, AWS. We'll have the same capabilities with Google Cloud when it comes out, where we've got that backup. The data is backed up. It's backed up to the blob storage. And then from there, when we do a restore, we pick and choose where we want to restore this to. Do we want to restore this data to another cloud instance? Do we want to bring it back on-prem? Are we using a hosted environment and we want to restore it to the hosted environment? You get to pick and choose where you go, what you want to do with the data, and how you want to leverage that data. With that, I'm actually done, David.
Great presentation. Really
Thank
like
you.
that, James. Thank you so much. Let's see. We do have some questions for you. While we do these questions from the audience, I'm just going to bring up a poll. For everyone out there, check out the poll on your screen. It says, what additional information would you like about the Veeam solution? And it's a multi-select question there. I'll leave that up while we answer some of these questions. So let's see. Lots of questions have come in here. First one that catches my eye, James, is you may have mentioned this, but how soon will GCP be available?
So the GCP for us, we announced it yesterday. We are shooting for when our version 11 comes out, which our version 11 is slated for January of next year. So we may have it out sooner, but they want to have it out basically either when our version 11 comes out or right around the same time is what they're shooting for.
Okay, great info there. That one was for you, Richard, out there in the audience. Stephen is asking, can Veeam help me protect the QNAP NAS appliance?
So we do actually have NAS capabilities to back up NAS environments, so like a QNAP. Basically, it's an SMB share or NFS share, either of those. If it's NFS, it's 4.1, and SMB, I'm trying to remember, I think it's 2.0, 3.0. We can go in, leverage those, and back up the NAS environment.
Nice. All right. Next question, also from Stephen. He's asking, can Veeam help me do anything to air gap my backup data against, to better protect it against ransomware?
Yes, when our version 10 of Veeam came out, we actually made it in the backup solution that when you say, hey, I want to do a backup, you mark it as immutable right into an immutable solution, which means that it's S3 today. Doesn't mean that it's Amazon S3. It means it's S3, and we actually have quite a few vendors, both on-prem and in the cloud, that leverage the S3 technology with immutability and can be written to either of those. And it's all listed on Veeam's website on who are the vendors today that have immutability capabilities.
Excellent. Yeah, in fact, I know we're doing a webinar with Veeam coming up here in a few weeks with Veeam and one of those partners specifically talking about that, creating immutable backups. So very cool that that's a new capability in the latest version. The next question, how do I know how quickly lost data can be restored? Is there some way to test that or measure that?
So with on-prem backups, yes, there is a way to test it. We actually have Sure Backup and Data Labs and a couple other things to test for that. When it comes to talking about cloud, there's no great solution yet because most people are restoring it into the cloud. Now, if you decide I want to do my backups of my cloud VMs and bring them back on-prem, you can use the on-prem solutions with Data Labs and everything to actually restore into those to look at, is all my data there? Can I restore all my data in the event that I have a disaster? And anything you want to do with that data. Like I've got one customer right now, they're starting to use our AWS solution, and they're bringing it back on-prem for the developers. The developers are staying in their own VMware infrastructure, so we're taking those backups, bringing them back on-prem, restoring them into VMware, and they're able to test, play with, and also see, what data is there or is there any data missing. Nice.
All right. Lots of good questions coming in here. I can't keep up with all of them. What about backing up Microsoft 365 and Teams? Is that possible with Veeam?
So today, Veeam, when we're backing up Teams, we're grabbing just the SharePoint data and some of the other data that's out there, like OneDrive or any of those. You will see our version 5 was announced. Our version 5 is supposed to be out hopefully at the end of this month or sometime within, at least before the end of this quarter, it should be out. And version 5 has integrated Teams backup, where we will back up the Teams and do a restore of the Teams. So if you've ever looked at Veeam, we've got our Explorers that we launch, and there's a Teams one that's being created that will be out before the end of this year.
Nice. All right. I like this question they're asking, or they say we need a POC and proposal for Veeam to replace our backup solution. Who should I contact?
If you can put some information in that it gets back to either me or to Travis, who is my marketing specialist on with me today, we will make sure we find out who your actual rep is inside of Veeam, and we will get them in contact with you.
Perfect. What about, Brandon's asking here, where can I get the free version of Veeam? Is there a free version of Veeam?
So there are free versions of Veeam. If you go to veeam.com, you can get the on-prem free version, which is called our community version. Like I said, it allows you to back up 10 VMs. If you're wanting to run the cloud stuff, so AWS or Azure, just go into the marketplace. And in both marketplaces, it actually marks free version of Veeam, and we'll spin up inside of both of those environments and allow you to use them in those environments.
Excellent. Scott said, Veeam is a fantastic product. We've been using it for years. I'd love to hear that. Yeah. Lots of other good questions here. Okay, so this is a good one. When it comes to backing up data, that's on premises and putting it in some sort of cloud offering, I know you mentioned GCP is a new capability that's coming. Kind of what are the other options available to us? I'm sure there's other public clouds, and then I've heard of Veeam Cloud providers. Is that the right term?
Yes, we have what we call our VCSPs, our Veeam Cloud Service Providers. So, natively, when you're looking at a backup file, you can right-click on it and say, I want to restore it to Azure. I want to restore it to AWS, Google Cloud coming later this year. Or there are Veeam certified cloud or certified service providers that what you do is you actually can take your backup files and write them to the service provider. And then the service provider, you rent out your requirements. So whether it be VMware, Hyper-V, AHV, you rent out space in their environments and you restore them right into their environments. Some of those service providers actually let you do replication, and Veeam's replication is different than some of our competitors where we're not replicating backup files, we're actually replicating the VMs at a host level. And we're registering in one of the service providers' host level environment. And so that way, the replication is as continuous as you put it. So if I say every 15 minutes I'm replicating it, the data is within 15 minutes when I turn it on in that service provider. So we have ways with service providers to be able to make sure that your data is, near real-time backups. Nice.
Joseph's asking, what about if I have an environment where bandwidth is a constriction or issue? Does Veeam have any sort of throttling, or what's your suggestion on that?
So Veeam has a couple different ways that we can play with things. If we're taking data out to the cloud, we do have throttling capabilities that you can go in and you can say, I want to throttle the network bandwidth down to 5 megs. Or I've got some customers that are still on old T1s, and so they throttle it down to under 1.5 megs. Sometimes very, very small pipes that they're using, and they actually dictate that we're only moving data to the cloud at night when people aren't there. So, we've got those in place. If you're writing from one data center to another data center, we also have what we call our WAN accelerators, where you can basically take the data as it's writing it to another data center and say, check to make sure I haven't written this block already. And so we're checking every block before we write it across the wire. And if we see we've already written it across the wire before, we just put pointers in place on the other side of where that block is sitting on the other side.
Nice. Another question here, they're asking if I have applications and data running in the cloud, can Veeam help to protect those applications as well?
So on AWS today, we are able to do application consistent on, basically the same that we do on-prem. So, all your Microsoft applications, Oracle, those we're able to do today. Inside of Azure, we're waiting for our V2, which should be out any time now. And our V2 of the Azure solution will have the application aware. But right now with Azure, we're just doing crash consistent.
Excellent. And then I like this question they're asking, if I want to, continually minimize my cloud spend for my backup data that I'm protecting in the cloud, can Veeam help me to migrate that data, say from one cloud to another? For example, let's say AWS is just too expensive for me. I've found another public cloud. I want to move my backup data over there. Is that possible?
Yes. Yeah, with all our solutions, you can move the data to another cloud solution or back to on-prem. Let's say you're using Azure and you put in the express route from Azure. You don't have those egress charges coming back on-prem when you have express route inside of Azure. You're using your own pipe, everything that you've put in place. So you don't have to worry about egress charges. You could say, I'm going to back it up for 7 days inside of Azure to make sure I've got the fastest restores. And then after 7 days, we can take and make copies of that data over to your on-prem storage that you have sitting, that's cheaper and a little easier for you to maintain.
Excellent. All right. Well, there's a lot more technical questions we didn't have time for. I put those there in the folder for you, James. perhaps you can respond to some of those after the event here. But thank you so much for being on. Really excellent presentation.
Thanks, David.
For more information on Veeam, of course, check out the handouts tab right there. That'll take you to veeam.com. Veeam always does a great job with tons of resources on there, free trials, white papers, videos, ebooks, things like that. So make sure that you check out veeam.com for more information. And it's now time for our first prize giveaway. We have an Amazon $500 gift card going to Al Suman from Georgia. Congratulations. And our first Microsoft Surface tablet going to Gary Savard from Massachusetts. Congratulations. Gary Savard from Massachusetts and Al Suman from Georgia. Many more prizes still to give out on the event today, so make sure that you stay tuned for that. And now I'm excited to introduce our next presenter on today's Megacast. Welcome, Sahil Bansal, Product Marketing Manager at Nutanix. Sahil, take it away.
Thank you for inviting us, and thank you everyone for joining today. It's a pleasure to be able to talk to you about how Nutanix is helping our customers build a unified hybrid and multi-cloud. For those of you that might not be familiar with Nutanix, we started as a company about 11 years ago with our hyperconverged infrastructure offering, where we pioneered the field of hyperconverged infrastructure for our data center folks, IT ops teams that wanted a better solution for managing their on-prem infrastructure. We provide compute, storage, networking, virtualization, all delivered through one software-driven solution that you can install in any supported hardware platform. And that's all delivered as a software solution, so that's what we call our digital hyperconverged infrastructure services. And that's been the backbone of what Nutanix has done in terms of modernizing three-tier legacy architectures towards a hyperconverged infrastructure architectures for our on-prem data center teams. Along with that, over the last several years, we've added a whole bunch of new services where we use our HCI as the offering, specifically around data center services for storage, networking, business continuity. For the DevOps teams, we offer cloud-native management platforms. We offer application lifecycle management and database as a service. And for VDI and desktop as a service needs as well, we have our desktop services offering. And that whole portfolio is what we call the Nutanix Cloud Platform, which has traditionally been delivered in a private cloud solution built on the data center. And over the last year or so, we've been building to extend that out to public clouds, to hyperscalers, and truly unify this cloud platform across both the data center as well as public clouds like hyperscalers and more. That's what our vision is for hybrid and multi-cloud. And the reason for doing that is because we talk to IT teams, enterprise IT teams, and they realize the benefits of both public as well as private clouds. It's not a case of one versus the other, but it's about how do I get the best out of both the worlds? How do I make sure that my workloads that are more suitable for remaining in the data center get the benefits of being able to control my consumption, being able to have more predictable performance while keeping costs also a little bit under control. But workloads that need to burst on demand, that need to have more scalability, agility, they are able to get the benefits of public cloud while not operating these two in silos, but truly operating this as a unified hybrid cloud environment, especially for our IT infrastructure teams, where they might be concerns about expanding to public clouds, but ending up running that environment as a silo. So truly unifying this private cloud and public cloud solutions is what we do with our hybrid and multi-cloud solution. And this has not been an easy problem to solve, even though hybrid cloud has been around for a while. But truly integrating an on-prem environment and multiple public cloud environments has its challenges, namely around maintaining networking complexity between your data center and multiple public clouds, making sure that your infrastructure is not being consumed in silos, because that leads to more inefficiencies, which inevitably leads to increases in cost, right? We've probably all heard stories about, somebody left a compute instance running in public cloud, and 1 week later you realize, oops, now you just spent thousands of dollars in your company's budget. So how do you benefit from a hybrid cloud environment while maintaining control over it, as well as helping your businesses continue to advance? When we talk to our customers, what we see that what is needed in terms of such a unified hybrid cloud solution is a single platform that spans both on-prem and public cloud, and that lets IT ops teams and cloud teams use consistent skill sets and constructs in both environments, as opposed to having to learn different infrastructure management skills for each different cloud environment, and also enabling truly a seamless migration, elasticity, burstability from private to public clouds, so that you don't have to spend months and millions of dollars in re-architecting your applications to move them from on-prem to public cloud. And the way we deliver this in our solution is one of the key features is that we've built in native integration with public cloud providers and the Nutanix on-prem solution, so that you get direct access to public cloud services without having to manage additional networking overlays. And that's delivering what we call as freedom from cloud lock-in, not just at the technology layer, but also at the business layer, because you can also migrate your licenses across cloud environment, so that it's truly one overall IT business investment that you are thinking about, as opposed to different silos of on-prem and multiple public clouds, right? So unifying that on-prem and public cloud environment involves decoupling your applications from the underlying platform, as well as decoupling your business investment from the underlying platform. That's what our solution called Nutanix Clusters delivers. And if you might have seen our press release, our announcement that went out last week, where we announced the general availability of Nutanix Clusters, which now delivers the hybrid and multi-cloud ready infrastructure, helping our customers run the full Nutanix Cloud platform, either in their on-prem or in public cloud environments, along with a unified management plane that stretches across both private and public clouds, helping you manage infrastructure from a single console, whether that's your on-prem infrastructure running in an on-prem Nutanix cluster, or your cloud infrastructure running in a Nutanix cluster on AWS. So the first cloud that we support is AWS, with others to come very, very soon. And in terms of the key use cases that we've seen from our customers, what do they see as the benefits of hybrid or multi-cloud for, or what are they're using it for? The big one is, of course, lift and shift. You have applications that are running in your on-prem environment that you need to move to public cloud. You could spend a lot of time to re-architect those apps, or you could use a solution that allows you to truly migrate apps to the public cloud with absolutely no code change. And another key use case is maybe you don't want to migrate your apps to the cloud, but you just want to benefit from the public cloud agility and elasticity. So Nutanix Clusters helps to connect your on-prem to AWS environment, so that then you can on-demand burst into public cloud, provision additional resources. Let's say you might want to provision additional VDI. So we make it super simple for you to deploy capacity in public cloud, integrate that with your on-prem applications, so that you can keep your, let's say, your Citrix golden image on-prem, but deploy additional VDI into public cloud on demand, and scale back when you might not need that additional capacity again. We see a lot of customers interested in using the public cloud regions as a DR site, as a secondary site, instead of having to maintain their own secondary data center. So again, we help to connect the on-prem and the public cloud world, and then you can keep your public cloud, your AWS region, as your backup recovery, as your DR site. And lastly is about integrating with public cloud services, so that you can modernize certain legacy applications that might be running in your data center by connecting natively to public cloud services. Maybe you might want to use certain AI or ML services on the public cloud side that you may not have access to in your data center. So we allow you to connect your legacy apps running in your data center natively with public clouds like AWS. And the key the key innovation behind this, as I mentioned, is first of all the native integration with the cloud networking. What that means is you are able to use your existing VPN connectivity, your existing VPCs and subnets on the AWS side. It is all of your existing setup. You don't have to create any new additional setup because we've put in the necessary effort to make sure that the VMs that are running in your hybrid cloud environment, they get the same IP address as the AWS EC2 native space. So to the AWS instances, it appears as those VMs running on Nutanix are basically just like any other EC2 native VMs. So you get direct access to AWS services because you're operating in the same native space on the AWS networking. You don't have to manage any additional networking complexity, which leads to higher performance and lower latency operations. And we are able to migrate your VMs, containers, all of your infrastructure, and the apps running on them seamlessly from on-prem to the public cloud world while delivering the same level of performance that our HCI capability has been known for in your private cloud environment. No retooling, no refactoring, no code change, moving apps from on-prem to public cloud while still maintaining the same level of performance that you might be used to in your data center environment. And it's all your same existing Nutanix software, same existing AWS accounts. It's not any new silos of cloud accounts that we create, which means you also benefit from being able to use your existing AWS credits or reserved instances that you might have already paid for on your AWS side. Similarly, if you are already using the Nutanix software on-prem, you're able to benefit from knowing that Nutanix software inside out, as well as having the same licenses that you already purchased for on-prem, and now just apply that in the hybrid environment of Nutanix running on public clouds. So it's your same Nutanix software, your same AWS account, while delivering the benefits of a hybrid environment. So this solution is GA. It is available for everybody to try out today, Nutanix Hybrid Cloud with AWS. And very soon, over the next few weeks, over the next little while, you will hear more about our expansion towards Azure. We are actively working towards it, and that the solution for Nutanix and Azure should also be coming out pretty soon. And that will be a truly unified hybrid and multi-cloud is how we see it. It's not your on-prem in a separate silo with AWS and on-prem in a separate silo with Azure. It's truly bringing all of your cloud environments together. It's your data center, it's your existing AWS accounts, it's your existing Azure accounts, all coming together, operating as a unified hybrid and multi-cloud. So that's the solution that we are delivering. This is just another way to visually see what we mean by when we say it's truly a lift and shift of your VMs, of your containers, of your apps from on-prem to AWS with no code change, no change to the application networking. And with just one click, we also help you easily provision additional EC2 bare metal instances and automatically provision more capacity, more Nutanix HCI running on those EC2 bare metal instances and replicate those VMs. All of that process can be automated using our application runbooks, as we call them. And for any existing Nutanix customers that might be on the call, you might recognize the background UI there a little bit. That's what we call our Prism management plane. That's what our customers have been using to manage their on-premises infrastructure, where they have Nutanix running in their data center environment. And from that Prism Central, our customers would typically be managing Nutanix using either the AHV hypervisor that we provide or Nutanix running with ESXi or Hyper-V, basically managing all of the Nutanix on-prem clusters. And now the same Prism Central also helps you manage the Nutanix on AWS cluster. So it's truly, central. It's what we call one Prism Central to rule them all. We do deploy AHV on the cloud cluster, but that is completely independent of any hypervisor that you might have in your on-prem environment. So it's integrating the whole infrastructure management lifecycle, whether that's VMs, containers, storage, and it's also unifying the application of networking policies or security policies, all from the same Prism Central environment. That Prism Central just becomes the center of your universe from an IT infrastructure management perspective, whether it's on-prem, whether it's AWS, or the future clouds to come in the near future. And another key feature that we've built in is what we call hibernation and resume to help customers lower their operational costs. First of all, there is no refactoring involved. You can move your apps as is. So that in itself leads to lower cost of migration. And you are also able to use your existing AWS credits or reserved instances, which also helps with keeping AWS costs under control. But we understand the bare metal instances can be expensive, especially if you don't intend to use your hybrid environment 24/7. Let's say for burst stability use case or DR use case, you don't necessarily have to pay for those bare metal instances when you don't need them. So what we give our customers the ability to do is send those bare metal instances into hibernation mode, remove the Nutanix software, stop the EC2 instances, and send all of your data and metadata to S3 storage buckets. Storage buckets are a lot more cheaper than compute instances. So when you are running in the hibernation mode, all of your data is safe. You are not paying for the EC2 instances. You're not paying for the Nutanix software. You're just paying for the S3 storage bucket. And when you're ready to, bring back your hybrid environment again and establish that hybrid connectivity between AWS and Nutanix on-prem, with just one click, you can resume your bare metal instances. We will automatically install the Nutanix software, pull all the data from the S3 buckets, and restore your session as if nothing had happened. You're able to get back all of your session, all of your data with, there is no loss of data, and you're able to save on the operational costs when you're not actually needing to use your hybrid environment. And the license mobility, so I mentioned that the same, we want to decouple you also at the business investment layer. The same Nutanix licenses that you might be using in your data center, they work in AWS. And in future, when we support other clouds like Azure, they will also work in the Azure clusters. So it's giving you the flexibility to migrate your apps without having to worry about unused license capacity that you might have already invested in with Nutanix. On the AWS side, these are the 4 bare metal instances that we support today: M5D, i3, i3EN, and Z1D. Any region, any AWS region that has these bare metal instance availability, you will be able to run Nutanix clusters on AWS in those regions. In terms of consumption and billing model, obviously this is a hybrid cloud, so there are 2 different components to it. What you pay for the EC2 instances to AWS, and what you pay to Nutanix for the Nutanix software. And that has a couple of different components. For our existing Nutanix customers, we allow them the flexibility of BYOL, bring your own license, and apply that in the hybrid environment. As well as for new customers or customers that want to expand beyond their license capacity, their existing license capacity, we mirror the consumption models that you are used to in the cloud, which is pay as you go, right? So, you just want your hybrid connectivity established for a few hours per day or for a few days in a week. We will, under that billing model, we only bill you for your actual consumption at the end of the month. Or for customers that want the flexibility of, I know how much I am going to use. Here is a certain amount that I'm willing to commit. We offer a commitment-based pricing, which is an annual commitment. Let's say you might want to commit to paying $100,000 applicable towards Nutanix in your hybrid cloud. You get the appropriate benefits of discounting, and we meter those on the basis of CPU cores and storage. So talk is cheap. The benefit is, as I say, the proof is in the pudding. We have what we call a test drive, which is available for everyone. If you go to our website, nutanix.com/clusters, you can take the test drive, which is a self-guided experience of how you can deploy Nutanix on AWS, how easy we make it for you to use your existing VPN setup, existing AWS subnets, and connect it with your on-prem environments and migrate apps from on-prem to public cloud. Once you are comfortable with how the product works, you can extend the test drive to a 30-day free trial, which gives you access to the real product. And then you can connect that with your AWS environment, run a simple CloudFormation script, which will give us access to your AWS account. And after that, it only takes about 30 to 40 minutes to deploy a Nutanix cluster in your AWS VPCs. Connect it with your on-prem environment. If you have VPN connectivity already established between your on-prem data center to AWS, it honestly takes less than 1 hour to get that hybrid cloud experience ready. So visit nutanix.com/clusters, take the test drive, see how Nutanix can help you easily deploy a hybrid cloud with AWS, and stay tuned for our news to come on the Azure side. That's all that I have today. Happy to take any questions.
Absolutely, yeah. Great presentation, Sahil. Congratulations on the release of Nutanix clusters. Very cool stuff. One of the questions that came in, Neil is asking, can Nutanix essentially help make my backup and data protection easier?
Absolutely. So Nutanix has our own native DR solution, which we call Xi Leap. Xi is basically our branding for anything that's managed by Nutanix. With Xi Leap, we help our customers already do their disaster recovery in the Nutanix cloud, which is Xi Cloud. With Nutanix clusters, now you can use the same concepts of Leap, same skill sets, same tooling, but now you are able to do that into AWS. So it's giving our customers the freedom of cloud. Do you want to use the Nutanix cloud for your DR needs, or do you want to use AWS for your DR needs, or Azure when we support it? The same skill sets, the same tooling, the same constructs are applicable in any cloud. So it definitely makes it much more easier to use a cloud environment for backup and DR.
Excellent. Nice. Yeah, that sounds like that could really help out a lot. And there's a couple of questions here around, I would say, resiliency, asking about, how many copies of the data are kept? Are there multiple data centers that they can be replicated to? If there's downtime, basically, how quickly can we get back up and running? I'm just kind of trying to summarize all the questions into one. But you want to talk about resiliency for a little bit?
Yeah, so today the Nutanix clusters are deployed in a single AWS availability zone, but it is definitely on our short and medium-term roadmap to support multi-AWS availability zone deployment. It is entirely up to the customer how many copies of the data you want to make. We have a variable in our solution called replication factor. So if you use a replication factor of 2, which is the minimum that we recommend, then you basically get 2 copies of your data. Today, they would be stored in the same AWS AZ, but at least it still adds a bit more resiliency than having it only on-prem. Now you have it in AWS. Very soon, we will have multi-AWS availability zone. So then you would be able to have your data on-prem, data in AWS availability zone 1, data in AWS availability zone 2. So that adds an even more layer of how many different places you can have your data stored in.
Right, got it. Okay. And then so when it comes to Nutanix clusters, is this something, would they be required to first have Nutanix on premises, or can you deploy Nutanix clusters just into the public cloud?
You can absolutely deploy Nutanix clusters just in the public cloud. The benefit of having Nutanix on-prem is simply that you have that hybrid experience, right? The cluster solution was built keeping the need for hybrid cloud in mind. Maybe most of the time you want to stay in your data center and burst occasionally into public cloud, or it could be the other way around as well. Most of the time you can stay in the public cloud side, and sometimes you might want to bring back apps on-prem, or you might want to just shut down your data center completely and move fully to public cloud. You do get started on the public cloud side when you configure the Nutanix cluster solution. So it is decoupled from having the need to have Nutanix on-prem. It just helps you with the hybrid connectivity. But you can absolutely run Nutanix on AWS without having any Nutanix on-prem.
Yeah, so I just brought up this slide again with the free trial and free test drive information. Sahil, you want to walk us through a little bit? If people go here, they sign up, it's a very quick, simple form. What happens after that?
Yeah, so the test drive is, when you fill out the form for the test drive, you will get an email with an access link that will bring you into sort of like a simulation environment where we host all the infrastructure at the back end, and there are step-by-step guided instructions. This is where you would go in to configure your AWS account. This is where you would go in to deploy a Nutanix cluster on AWS. This is where you would go in to integrate it with your on-prem environment if you want to. It takes about 30 to 45 minutes to finish the test drive. If you want, you can take it. If you don't want to, you can bypass it and get straight into the product, the 30-day free trial period. We will get notified whenever somebody begins a test drive or a free trial. We have chat support available in our test drive. So, you can just reach out via a little chat widget, and our support team will be there to help you our sales engineers are available to get on a call and help you actually deploy your hybrid cloud environment. So available to help our customers build a seamless hybrid and multi-cloud experience.
Excellent. And that URL for Nutanix.com/clusters is also in the handouts tab for anyone out there who wants to, just click on that URL and give the Nutanix cluster solution a try for yourself. It's very easy to do. And in fact, the form has one field, which is email. Simplest form ever. I like that.
I see.
All right.
I see one more question, which is important. So if I may just quickly answer that.
Go ahead.
Do I expose my data during the test drive and trial? You do not expose your data at all during the test drive. It is completely like a simulated walk me style environment. There is no data connectivity during our test drive. It's to help you understand how you would actually use the product. When you do actually use the product, you are simply sending us some information back about your infrastructure connectivity, nothing related to your actual data. It is your cluster. Nutanix is just providing you the underlying platform, but it's owned and operated and managed by the customer. It's not owned by Nutanix. So it's your Nutanix cluster. We are here to help you run it.
All right. Well, I think that's all the time we have in our live Q&A session, but a really great presentation. Thank you so much for teaching us today about the new Nutanix offering, Nutanix clusters. Thanks, Sahil.
Thank you, everyone. Have a great day.
All right. I've just brought up the poll question out there for everyone. It's in the slides window. It says, what additional information would you like about the Nutanix solution? So I'll leave that up there. Sahil had to run, but I've got all the questions that came in queued up for him. We will get those to him right after the event. Thank you for all the excellent questions. We answered as many as we could. So I'll leave up the poll while we announce our next set of prize winners. We have another Amazon $500 gift card. This one's going to Harold Neiman from Wisconsin. Congratulations, Harold Neiman. And then our next grand prize for another Microsoft Surface Pro tablet is going out to Jason Hoeing from Indiana. Congratulations, Jason Hoeing from Indiana. A lot more prizes still to give away on the event. I count 3 more grand prizes and 4 more gift cards, so make sure that you stay tuned for that. And if you haven't answered the Nutanix poll question, of course, we appreciate your participation in that. All right, thank you, everyone. It's now time to move on to our next presentation on today's Megacast. I'm excited to introduce Mr. Robert Rame, Director of Market Intelligence at Rubrik. Robert, take it away.
All right, thank you very much, David. Thank you all for joining us. It's the end of the office as we know it. You all probably think you know exactly what this presentation is going to be about, and I'm hoping that I'm going to surprise you both pleasantly and challenge some of the things that you think you know about what's going on right now. I chose this title very specifically, not just as the REM reference, but also to make you understand how easily it is to influence you and see that you are not always completely in control of what you're thinking. So this is the famous quote that we heard earlier this year, and we've all just pretty much lived this world. We've seen the 2 years of transformation in 2 months. Yeah, it is basically what I'm calling to some degree is the great reprioritizer to some degree. We didn't have any choice. We had to get all these things, all this remote working deployed and done. All these things that may have been held up in approvals just got pushed through. And it was pretty much a massive sprint. I've been talking to people in the United States and also over here in Europe about what they've accomplished and what they've seen. And quite honestly, we are tired. So that's really the thing here, is that this is not a sustainable type situation where we're in. The CFO has seen that we're able to do all this with no additional resources, and they think that we're just going to keep doing it. And that's actually not necessarily something that's going to work for long term. One, because transformation or constant transformation burns out an organization. And a recommendation that you might be interested in implementing is taking all of the different organizations or all the different groups in the organization, putting them in an Excel spreadsheet, adding a month along it, and then as a transformation project it impacts them, setting them as either red, yellow, or green. And the reason why that recommendation is there is to just kind of minimize the impact over time of what you're doing to the organization as a whole, and minimize the reasons why somebody might reject a project or product that you're trying to deploy and bring out when you're doing your transformation. So Rubrik is a backup vendor, but I'm not going to be doing a hard sell here. I just would like you to know what we do. We bridge the on-prem and the cloud world and allow you to have metadata oversight between those two worlds. And we'd appreciate it if you'd take a call from our sales afterwards, but I won't spend too much time talking about us. I'd like to give you some information that helps you in your job. So we're going to start off with a little mental test for you. And now everybody, you're sitting at home, right? And to some degree, you've all probably done, I don't know, maybe I'm just the crazy one here, but maybe you've all done at least a Rorschach test once in your life, or, in the school or whatever. And this is kind of an interesting thing, because it definitely, it's almost empirical demonstration that everyone sees things slightly differently. And why that's relevant is because when you're trying to determine what is going to happen in the next year, it's very relevant that you see accurately without subjective bias or anything else, if falling victims to any of the fallacies that could cloud or make you make the wrong predictions. So you might see a manta ray, you might see the predator mask. Whatever you see is something that is very much up to you. And I just want to get this demonstration. I'll be giving a couple more IT-related Rorschach tests a little bit later in the presentation. Just this is a holding point. So the point here really winds up being is that we're all guilty of bias, fallacies, and if you really get good, you can learn how to do super forecasting. Look for the book of the same title. It's very good. It allows you to incorporate new data, adjust your assumptions, and then thereby get a better, more accurate prediction as you go, so that you're not setting yourself, anchoring to the past, and then not changing based on new data that's coming in. Another problem might be that you're too close to a problem. The proximity is an issue. If you're too close to an issue, maybe you think that it's going to happen faster. And that's the speed of when something is going to change. There's something called return to the mean that very much says that usually the best prediction is going to be that you go back to a normal status. And that's something that you can always make that prediction and then adjust it as you go. But the point there is that when you're very close to a problem, you always think it's going to happen sooner than it will. And that's something that while I was at Gartner, they kind of try to drill it into our heads that maybe just because it's obvious to you, it's not obvious to everybody, and maybe things aren't going to change so much. An outcome bias, a confirmation bias. These things are very much like, when you're talking about a confirmation bias, you're actually talking about saying, well, I knew it all along. And then selecting confirming data. That's when you're trying to make a decision and you actually just select data that supports your position. The other things are the Hofstadter's law, which is a great one for project planning. You're probably all very much aware of it. It basically tells you that a project is always going to take longer than you think it will, even taking Hofstadter's law into account. And Parkinson's law is sort of the goldfish in a bowl, or the cat to a box type thing, that projects will always fill up the allotted time at least. So what I'm trying to say here is really just what you need to do when you're looking at the future. to avoid making mistakes is you need to be leveraging some sort of external cross-validation and then looking at things several times to avoid having any kind of bias. So we'll start with our first IT test. What does everyone see? Now you can say it to yourself. I mean, I know what I saw the first time I saw it, and what I hear very frequently when we're talking about some of the good things that might come out of this, and that's the chance to save, and that's what the CFO sees. The CFO sees an enormous waste of real estate. But if you think about it, there's other people that see, okay, well, this is an empty office building, empty parking lot, plenty of free parking. Two ways of seeing that. But if you look closely, that's not an empty parking lot at all. There's cars in the left-hand side. And there's also, maybe this isn't in just an empty building. It might just be vacant. There's no name on the door. You can't really see anything. But what I want you to do is actually look deeper here. What some people miss is actually inside. It's the coffee machine. Maybe they miss the avocado toast. Maybe they miss seeing their friends, and a counterpoint might be they have abject fear. Some people might see this office as being, The Walking Dead, or Raccoon City, as this building actually kind of looks like. But the key here is that you can't just look at the building and see one thing. You really have to begin to look. Does this make sense? What I'm thinking, based on the information that I have. And that's where you begin to see past just the initial impact of the news, the impact of communications on Slack or whatever, and you begin to be able to see past what might be in the next couple months and see what's going to happen. Now, if you're a CIO, you probably see, especially a new CIO, you see a problem with networking. If you haven't gotten yourself embedded in the business yet, you see that you might have some problems with getting some projects, some transformational projects, and off the ground. You might have a problem finding co-conspirators to get these projects going that you need for a lighthouse to demonstrate to the rest of the organization that you're capable of doing transformational things. So what you probably saw as well is a fortune in existing investment. And what that means is if everybody's not in the office, or if people aren't in the office as much, then the budgets are out of alignment with the real hybrid requirement needs. And essentially, you look at these empty racks, these cables hanging down and everything else, that the reason why we do things on-prem is because it's a high performance environment that we can control. We don't have noisy neighbors. We have control over the reliability. Well, guess what? You're accessing it now, or at least a portion of the people listening, over VPN or through very difficult to manage and not the best experience, sometimes very expensive VDI. And the question that you have to ask yourself really is, does the data center even make sense anymore? So what has changed since the end of 2019? And my assertion is not a lot, actually. And that's what you might not have expected to hear when we did this, when I introduced this presentation. We still have a skills gap that's very much a problem. When I talked to IT professionals and CIOs at the end of 2019, they all were talking about security and security problems and skills gaps with cloud capabilities. So, looking for somebody who had Kubernetes capabilities or something like that. Now that's a problem if you're constantly chasing skills and you're not looking to grow your own capabilities. That's what's going to hold back your projects and innovation. And that's something that very much you're always looking at a 70-30 rule. You need to be looking at ways to reduce the time that you're spending on operations for your infrastructure. This is a big deal because what you wind up with is 70% of your time is spent just running an environment. 30% of your time is spent on projects and and refresh. And that's something that if you look at refresh, it's very much a hamster wheel, because by the time you've gotten the storage array put in, for example, and the migration done, you're probably starting your next RFP. So if you're looking at your infrastructure as something that you want to get a gold medal in, you're never going to win that. So you're on the hamster wheel very much. The problem also becomes is that ops and projects are often the same pool of full-time employee resources. And what you have at the end of this is that you have one non-run workday equivalent per week. This is something that is a very, very, very big deal in terms of how to get more time. And that's where you need a radical simplification of infrastructure. And one more sales thing, that's something that hyperconvergence and Rubric do very well. So the uncertain future does come with essentially what I'm going to call a lot of the same problems. So I've done polling at the end of 2019 and then did polling in 2020. And the same problems kept coming up. So I'm going to come back to that skills gap, and that's something that really does hold you back. The main thing here is that this is a new abnormal situation, and the regulators aren't going to turn their heads forever. The CFO either. So we've got a hybrid workplace that's almost certain in a lot of industries to continue. You're accessing this very expensive data center over VPN and VDI. We've seen a lot of cloud and SaaS adoption that's accelerated in the first half of 2020. But as part of that, I've talked to a lot of folks that have been talking about, well, we deployed this, but now we're going back and securing it. Not exactly the best model, but we do what we have to, I suppose. But then also like the physical security aspect for remote workplace. Not everybody wants to have a camera over their head, but if you work with secure information, there might not be regulators that are, or even your CISO might not tolerate that. Or if you're working with credit cards, if you have a phone that's available, as opposed to how it is on prem. And then the last thing about the hybrid workplace is really that question about maintaining the productivity. And that's something that we think, oh yeah, we're doing just fine, but we haven't even hit the 1 year point yet. Now, if you look back at Cisco when they did this whole thing, it's very interesting that after about a year, you start to get culture drift, and productivity will begin to slip because your teams aren't together often enough. So the hybrid data center winds up being the next thing, and I say, when does it happen? What's the mix? Are you going to get rid of your legacy? Because most organizations that I'm talking to, they're forced into this dual world because they can't get rid of legacy. And that's something that we go back to the bias of when does this happen? How soon do you think it's going to happen? Because you could probably take that number of what you're thinking and double it. And then of course there's problems between the visibility and security. Just stampeding off to the cloud doesn't mean that you're going to have all these intrusion detection, intrusion protection things that you've got on prem. So it's something that you have to look for the parity between on-prem and public cloud or even SaaS. So there are some advantages to this situation. The geographic liberation for talent sourcing is one of the bigger ones. I think in terms of we talk about the skills gap, but you go back to this and then suddenly, wait a second, maybe I can pull some FTEs in non-urban locations, and they're going to take maybe rural Iowa or Ohio. And one of my best friends is actually up in Ohio. And he's in a very non-urban location, great developer, and he might accept a lower salary. I'm not going to tell him that he's going to accept a lower salary, but he has a lower cost of living, so he's not a San Francisco Bay Area person. The pro might be also the 30 to 50% reduction in on-prem space, resilient for the second wave. Tell that to all the kids who aren't going to get snow days anymore. And then, of course, the quality of life for commuting. The cons, did I say anything about mental health? Well, I've been working here at home for 10 years now. I've got my ergonomics set. I've got a stand-up desk and a real chair and everything else. But I'm sharing bandwidth with the kids, and they play games and stuff like that. And I've also got my wife here, so there's some cons here about the reliability of my environment. But one of the biggest really winds up being the informal collaboration that you're missing if you're not on premises, especially if you're a CIO or a team member that never gets to see other people. Then, of course, the downside of on-prem plus remote, essentially, if you have to deploy and secure both, you're building more or less twice the rent. Then let's get into just the hybrid data center really quickly. The electrical advantages, the internet uplink. One thing that organizations don't usually get is they can recompete their internet uplink, but it hasn't gotten cheaper. Whereas DSL's home and mobile plans have gotten significantly cheaper. Eliminating the on-prem data center and going to a more cloud mix helps you refresh that helps you get off of the refresh hamster wheel and focus on your differentiation rather than your infrastructure. Now, I'm going to repeat that multiple times: differentiation, not infrastructure. If you think that you're going to get a gold medal for all the things that you're doing behind the scene as an IT team, you're not. That's the problem. You need everything to be radically simple, and it needs to be very easy to use if you're going to use it on-prem at all. And that's where the cloud actually comes in as a pretty good thing, because they manage the refresh, they manage the infrastructure, they manage a lot of things without you being responsible for the infrastructure and migrations. The real estate costs are obvious, but also one of the things that becomes very clear, and it's something that you should strive to avoid using these prediction techniques, is don't deploy any new legacy in 2020. Don't deploy something that you're not going to be using in 2021 or 2022 and beyond, because you're going to just have to retire it down the road. The cons, I've touched on the skills gap, the security gap, regulatory problems. Really, one of the things that I see very frequently is that folks treat the cloud as a hypervisor in the sky. Big mistake. It's very expensive. Now, cost is not always something that you need to reduce by going to the cloud, but it's definitely something that you need to watch out for. And my advice is really either take each application and work with the application owner, re-architect it, refactor it, reimagine it, or you're going to get into the situation where 18 months later you realize that you've made a big mistake and it's wrongly deployed and it's expensive. So with that, I'd like to ask for a few questions, and just want to repeat one thing: differentiation, not infrastructure. Radically simplify your infrastructure. Thank you very much.
All right, great presentation, Robert. Really enjoyed that. We got so many comments from folks out there in the audience about how this presentation really made them think. So kudos for doing that. It's one of the best presentations we've had here. So thank you so much. Robert, are you ready for some Q&A?
Sure thing. Thanks, David.
Excellent. All right, let's see. First question that came in, they're asking here is, oh, I had it and I lost it. Okay, here it is. How did you come up with the number reduction of 30 to 50% on-premises real estate? Where did that come from?
Oh, okay. So I'm former Gartner, so I'm constantly looking for data to make sure that I'm using a data-based, not a database, a data-based way of validating my opinions. So what happened here was actually I've been doing a lot of these video events, and I just started polling people. I started asking, doing a lot of one-on-ones and roundtables and everything else. And at first, I heard, it became a trend. So it started off. Somebody was saying 75% reduction. I kind of scaled it back and tried to use the super forecasting techniques to kind of hedge it in a little bit. And then I kept polling and kept asking people over time, and I've probably talked to well over 100 people in the CXO type category. I'd guess it's probably more like 150 since May in these small events. And that's where I came up with this 30 to 50%. I think it's going to be probably lower than this, maybe around the 30, but there's definitely going to be an interesting mix that's going to be possible.
I agree. Yeah, interesting to hear that number, those kind of numbers out there. It's certainly going to change the future of how we work in IT. Next question, they said, we know legacy is holding us back, but is it really difficult to retire some of these applications? You kept mentioning legacy, differentiation, and infrastructure together. So could you clarify on that point?
Yeah, there's going to be stuff that doesn't move. That's one of the problems with legacy. I've talked with exactly one person in the last 5 years that has actually successfully retired all their legacy. And I walked up to her. It was an IDC event actually in Stockholm. I walked up to her afterwards. I was like, "Congratulations, you've actually accomplished it." Because most people that I know, or most people I've talked to, still have these applications with hundreds of connections that they can't move. Now, these are things that it shouldn't hold you back from cloud aspiration. But, legacy can take other forms as well, and that's where the differentiation infrastructure, if you are going to run something on-prem, make sure that it's as simple as possible. Try to get rid of anything that's legacy, that requires care and feeding. And that allows your IT teams to up-level what they're doing to something that's more valuable to the organization, that's actually recognizable, projects that can help transform, as opposed to getting a gold medal and having the best backup environment in the world. And that's something we simplify.
Absolutely. Yeah, that real change is tough. Next question, you mentioned the skills gap, but how is focusing on differentiation, not infrastructure, going to help that?
Okay. Yeah, but okay. So essentially this comes from a point that I like to make. If you're running a bunch of old stuff, I'm using a polite term there, then you're probably not going to be such an attractive place to work, and you're not actually developing someone's career aspirations so that they can keep learning. And if you're not attracting people who are looking to learn, then you're probably not attracting the right kinds of people. So if you have nothing but legacy and you're not really getting rid of that mindset, if you're cutting your implementation or your infrastructure costs and thinking, it's all cloud's going to solve everything, then actually you're not getting to that point, because you're not focusing on your differentiation. You're not focusing on what the IT team can do to help the business itself to succeed and bring these new projects out. And that's what winds up stopping people from wanting to join an organization or stay there. Now, I know this is kind of a funny topic, but I think that you shouldn't look for somebody who already knows what to do, and you shouldn't look at your existing people as not knowing. You should look to simplify your infrastructure as much as possible to begin in aggregate to win back time, to plow back into upskilling your existing staff, allowing the older folks to work with the younger folks to teach them some new tricks, and the younger folks teach them about Twitch, or about how to do look at a JSON dump or something. It's just what I'm talking about here is really looking at the skills gap in a different way, in a growth mindset type way, and trying to empower that by reducing the complexity in infrastructure.
Yeah, you make a very interesting point there. So this is like an ecosystem here with employees where you want people who want to learn, and because those people who want to learn are going to do amazing stuff for the company, and that's really what the company needs, to begin with. So
I guess one follow-on point there is that something I always say is if you're constantly looking for somebody who knows, let's say Kubernetes, because Kubernetes solves problems for everybody, right? So if you're constantly looking for that person's not looking for a job right now. And if you're looking for somebody who knows security, how many mid-sized enterprise people are out there saying, "Man, we've had people turnover in security. Enterprise might be able to do a SIEM, but we can't do that to stuff." So what I'm saying is that you need to stop looking at external, because usually the team is the team. that's where you're kind of stuck. So if you look at it as projects and ops are the same people, and the team is the team, you're not going to be able to keep hiring new people to do these new things. Then it kind of forces you into a mindset that's going to really reward people when they join.
Excellent point. Excellent point. Let's see. Next question. What about when it comes to moving to the cloud? They're asking, why would we invest in any new on-premises solutions?
A simple answer to that one. That's when I was at Gartner, I dug into the data of the CIO survey, and it said 70% of people were cutting their investment in infrastructure. But I didn't stop there. I dug deeper into the data. This didn't actually get published. I found it's after the publication. And that was the 20-something% that was actually investing, and those were the early adopters, the trendsetters and everything else. So put simply, if you don't invest in on-prem and reduce complexity there and retire legacy, everything's going to be legacy junk. So you need to look at it tactically as what's eating your operational time. And then look at also things that can bridge the world between on-prem, edge, and also the cloud and SaaS. That's where you're looking for. You're looking for these things that can do all of that.
Got it. Okay. And then what about, you mentioned re-architecting and refactoring. Can you elaborate on what those actually mean?
Yeah. So there's actually if you're looking at moving to the cloud, look at the Microsoft Azure Cloud Journey. It's actually a really good ebook, and it talks about their journey where they looked at they triaged their applications and actually looked at what to do with them. Some of them you can just containerize them and throw them up there for elasticity purposes, and if you've got somebody who knows Kubernetes. And then some of them you may want to look at it, breaking it down and reimagining an application and looking at it from a microservices or, and essentially what you're looking at is not taking an application and just putting it in a catapult and flinging it up into the public cloud and then running it 24/7. That's what's expensive, in my opinion. And it usually results in tears, and 18 months later, when the credit card bills are just piling in from running something 24/7, that it's expensive and not the way to go. So, I mean, if it's legacy, maybe add some serverless functions or some functions that that legacy application can call from on-prem to make it look like a more modern application. But essentially, your journey is like building a cathedral. It's one stone at a time, and each application needs to be looked at from that. Some of them, maybe lift and shift works, but some of them, or most of them, are probably need to be re-architected, refactored, and then placed into the cloud so that you get the benefits of public cloud as opposed to just the costs.
Absolutely. I like this comment. Damon out here, he said, it's actually quite refreshing to hear someone actually speaking the truth about the current environment, real situations and struggles, along with actual information and solutions. Dude, you're awesome, he said.
Thanks, Damon.
So many great comments out there, folks who really enjoyed this refreshing content. Robert, a great presentation. Thank you so much for being on the event today.
Awesome, thank you, and thanks everybody. This is done for you all. So.
Excellent. All right. Thank you to Robert, and thank you to Rubrik, of course. For more information, check out the URL that's there in your audience console. That'll take you to Rubrik.com, and you can learn more about the Rubrik solution. Also, their Data Security Summit. You want to check that out. That's available now on demand. Rubrik, very innovative solution there. I'm thankful to have them on the event today, and thankful for Robert's excellent presentation. All right, and with that, it's time for our next prize announcement. We have an Amazon $500 gift card going to Colleen Olivas from California. Congratulations, Colleen Olivas from California. Still 3 more gift cards and grand prizes on the event today, so make sure that you stay tuned. And now we're moving on to our next presenter on today's Megacast. Do we have Peter or Jude yet?
Yes, this is Peter.
Hey, Peter. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm sorry that we couldn't connect to Jude, but appreciate you stepping in. Thanks for being here. Tell us what's going on with Dhruva and cloud solutions these days.
Sure, absolutely. Well, I wanted to talk about really how you can future-proof your backup and DR strategy with the cloud, because as customers are moving workloads to the cloud, data protection really is an enabler to help you move workloads to the cloud. But there's another aspect to that, right? So whether you're doing a lift and shift approach to the cloud, or perhaps you're expanding your use of SaaS-based applications, data protection plays a role really in all of those elements. And so, if you take a look today at what customers have, and increasingly, data is in more places. So that's really what we're going to talk about is, how cloud data protection can help you better manage and protect this data that's in so many different places and applications.
And Peter, I'm told that Jude is here with us as well. Jude, are you there still?
Yes, David. Hey, Peter.
Hi, Jude. Glad you could make it. Great. Well, I was just jumping into the data revolution story, and but happy to turn it over to you, and glad you were able to make it onto the call.
Sure. Thank you, Peter, for jumping in, and thank you, everyone. My apologies. I had a technical glitch. My name is Jude Daniel, and I am a part of the product management team in Dhruva. And today I'm going to briefly talk about the cloud strategy needed for our backup and disaster recovery needs. So if you work for a digital organization, you are already seeing changes in both your business and application models. From a business model perspective, your data has left the building and is spread across hybrid clouds, endpoints, and even edge devices. Applications are no longer monolithic, but made up of composite elements such as containers and microservices. Data and applications nowadays live in more places, but data is more about moving towards cloud, because we can do more with the data that is centralized, shared, as well as protected. First, it's lived in the data center, then we move to endpoints, then cloud apps, and finally we are now seeing a shift to containers, which offer both platform as well as environment portability. The gap that remains for many organizations is to protect this data, what architecture to use, and finally how to avoid silos. With all these changes, it is no surprise that data protection models are changing and moving towards cloud. Moving further, there are specific business needs which cloud today is positioned well to meet them. The first is pay-for-use model. As most line of business adopt this model, so data protection software should ideally follow it as well. No longer, you pay up front and move on. Scalability is another critical thing, especially when we are dealing in a pandemic world where it's harder to bring in crew or hardware, and the workload in the meantime is growing as well as the data on it. So cloud with its infinite scalability can meet this challenge easily. Then everything is agile these days. You cannot have agility without self-service. As new applications spin up, IT teams would like to protect them, allowing the applications to automatically restore if the need arises. Given we live in a global world with very localized regulations, IT team expects that backups needs to be there. However, they are not going to be there unless we plan for it. And that's where, cloud gives you, central governance, as well as allowing you to be compliant with regional regulations. Why SaaS for data protection in the data center. Let me start with a trend that we have seen over the past few years in automobile industry. Electric cars were always getting interest from people, and automobile industries invested heavily to research on them. What they were doing wrong is they were retrofitting electric motors and batteries into the body of a fuel-powered, engine-driven cars. And that's where it brings to Tesla. They have a unique case, and it's such a huge success. It is because they built the entire car around motors and batteries, a car that is software-driven and focused more towards power management. This platform of electric cars caters to customers' mobility and adds those really amazing features like zero emission, cost efficiency, as well as software-defined evolution. Similarly, a true SaaS model of data protection is designed to handle data irrespective of where it resides, be it cloud, on-premise, or your endpoint devices. That's why the traditional data protection might not work in the cloud era. Also, we have seen there are three key factors giving rise to this trend of SaaS-based model for data protection and management. As we have seen that data gets more and more fragmented, data protection and management have to be more centralized. A secular shift is happening towards cloud and subscription model, both for simplicity as well as scale. And finally, lack of affinity towards hardware-based model, both by customers and public market investors. In a traditional model for backups, you need a backup software, a storage server, or a dedupe appliance, and your tapes. This is a classic 3-to-1 model that we have all grown up with. Adding to it, a separate secondary site for replication for disaster recovery. So working in this model, you have to ensure that the backup agent is compatible with your backup software, your OS is updated, your patches are installed, keep a track of all those hardware refresh cycles, and then look after your tapes. The result is that there's a lot of manual overhead, and it definitely increases the cost. On top of it, scale is limited by software hardware, and you see that you have a lot of redundant data copies to manage. Now, with a traditional legacy model, there are some options where you can move some of your data copies to cloud as well. Now you have to manage this. Increases the manual overhead again, because now you have to manage your cloud environment as well. And with managing your cloud environment, there are some additional costs that comes with it, like your egress charges, your S3 port cost, your data access cost, which further increases the overall cost or the TCO for managing your backup infrastructure. In contrast, if you use cloud more efficiently, you can scale indefinitely and infinitely, and you don't need the backup server or the dedupe appliance. You don't need that manual overhead. Your backup data is directly written to cloud. You can also choose to back up all your data to a single storage region, which gives you the added advantage of increasing the deduplication. Or you can choose multiple storage regions across the world based on compliance or security reasons. Also, there's one bill, so you don't have to worry about any hidden costs like egress or S3 post or data access. SaaS model ensures that you don't need to provision resources in advance for application workloads to be protected. We have seen multiple instances where an admin provisions a VM and immediately adds it to the backup for data protection. Why Druva? Druva is one of the first SaaS vendor for data protection, and And we have over 4,000 enterprise customers, or 150 petabytes of their data is getting managed by Dhruva. And Dhruva is also VMC certified. So customers running VMware Cloud on AWS can back up and restore quickly, easily, and securely. And speaking of decreasing cloud storage cost, let's talk about AWS, who considers Dhruva as one of their top 5 storage partners. Since AWS introduced their storage services sometime back in 2005-6, they have decreased the prices of the storage by 67 times. They have never increased the price of any of the storage tier. They have only decreased the price of the storage. They also say publicly and openly that their goal is to continue with this trend and to continue to price storage to almost zero, which of course Dhruva can pass on to our customers as a solution is built natively on AWS. So a picture of the architecture that brings core value that Dhruva and us refer. First, customers often say that they would like to streamline the backup infrastructure, and it should scale as the data grows in the data center, while having the ability for self-service. Along with that, customers are also adopting new workloads and applications on AWS, Azure, Google Cloud Platform, any other public cloud vendor. Now with the birth of cloud workloads and the rebirth of the edge, only a cloud deployment model can protect data where it is served. Third, you no longer need to maintain that expensive secondary site for disaster recovery. Dhruva's disaster recovery solution, or as we call it, disaster recovery as a service, helps you fail over your workloads in your AWS VPC that is automated, secure, and fast. Along with that, it helps you meet the RTOs of minutes. And once the data lands in Dhruva Cloud, it's typically stored in warm storage. But if you need to hold data for longer periods of time, we offer the ability to automatically tier that data to cold storage. We offer 30% additional savings on the data in cloud storage. It's our way of passing additional savings to our customer. Traditional data, on the other hand, traditional data protection model itself has been kind of ransomware by asking you to pay upfront for 5 years or 3 years. With SaaS business model, you can go, you can pay as you go and true up and down whenever needed. Along with it, pay as you use model maximizes the operational cost. You might think that your existing solution might give you some additional savings because with the advent or the addition of cloud provider. However, if you do a deeper research, you'll find that although there are some cost savings, but it's not radical. Along with that, there's a manual overhead of managing 2 storage systems because you have to manage your on-premise storage as well as your cloud storage. From a savings perspective, one important factor to consider is if you are running dedupe services in the cloud, it is costly and requires persistent and high CPU cycles. Also, there are hidden costs which I mentioned earlier about ingress and egress charges for data movement when you manage your own AWS storage. On the other hand, Dhruva native cloud design delivers radical storage savings. So you don't need to have that manual overhead of managing your backup or archive management. It's just a one-click enablement. So you go on the UI and enable long-term retention, as well as intelligent archiving, which ensures that the active blocks stay warm and only the archive blocks go into the cold storage. There is native deduplication across workloads that gives you a radical cost savings, along with that there's no cost for data movement, which is egress charges, and almost 30% of storage savings because of S3 Global Deep Archive is 75% less than AWS S3 Glacier. So we offer data protection as a service to our customers. It can be cloud-native workloads or workloads residing in your data center. It can be cloud apps like Office 365, G Drive, Salesforce or Slack, and endpoints like your Windows or Mac devices, as well as mobile devices like iPhone or Android phones. One of the virtues of having your data on cloud is that you can do more with it without buying additional hardware or installing additional software. You can use your backup data for disaster recovery. Additionally, you can also take the backup data and think about leveraging it for e-discovery, compliance, or archival purposes. Further, you can also use the metadata for analytics and forensics, especially in these days, more around ransomware detection and ransomware protection. So if you have your metadata and you can do analytics and forensics based on the metadata of your data present in the cloud. One of the success story with the customer that we had. So this is University of Manchester. They are into higher education in UK, part of the Russell Group, and almost has 40,000 on students. So the main pain point was that the customer had made a commitment to VMC. They wanted to move their on-premise data center to VMware on AWS, but hadn't considered how to protect the data associated with it. So the customer had a long-term investment in one of the legacy vendors, but was looking at more of a cloud-first strategy. They wanted both their on-premise data center as well as VMC to be protected by a single vendor with a single architecture. Fitting it with the customer strategy of cloud-first, Dhruva was a clear solution due to leveraging AWS. As the customer was already investing in cloud technologies, it made sense to continue leveraging the power of cloud while protecting their workloads across different geography, as well as protecting different sorts of data. Also, one of the key differentiators that the customer mentioned was being a cloud-native solution. We were able to give them a predictable year-on-year cost for the VMC expansion. They plan to move around 250 to 300 VMs a year, and our pricing model, in fact, enabled them to budget for this growth. The single pane of glass, which is the management console, as well as ease of use, meant they decided to not even consider a POC with other vendors. On a benefit purposes, they also saw, after using it for a few months, they also saw that it reduced the admin time by more than 45% and had a great ROI on the investment. Also, ease of use meant that backup with VMC was no longer a headache. Finally, data is more valuable than ever. Data powers everything from business resiliency to agility. How we manage and protect that data is what makes the difference. Join us for an immersive virtual experience to learn how to navigate the new data challenges and business shifts. Please go ahead and register yourself for this virtual event where we'll have a lot of engaging keynotes by leading industry thought leaders and technology vendors. And it's one of the first Cloud Data Protection Summit. So please go ahead and register yourself. And in the meantime, Peter, David, any questions?
Absolutely, yeah. We do have some questions for you, Jude. A great presentation. While we take some questions, I'm just going to bring up this poll for everyone out there in the audience that says, what additional information would you like about the Druva solution? And we'll leave that up while we take some Q&A here. So first question I wanted to ask you, Jude, is can Druva help to move a workload to the cloud?
Yes. So I believe the use case that you are referring is more from a migration perspective, but yes, we do have an option. What you could do is you could back up from your on-premise and then restore it to any cloud location that you need.
Excellent. So Druva not only protects my data in the public cloud, it could help me to migrate data. Is that what you're saying?
It's not a migration use case, but more from a backup and restore perspective.
Got it. Okay. And then what about TCO changes? How can Druva help with, kind of total cost of ownership?
So from a TCO perspective, we have seen that the customers who are using legacy vendors have to refresh their hardware every 3 years, as well as, and if they are using additional storage from cloud, there are additional costs which are mostly hidden. From our TCO analysis, we have found that customers can save somewhere between 30 to 45% based on their workloads and based on the data that they are protecting. Also, we have introduced offering called as LTR and infrequent access. So with LTR, we pass on 30% of savings if you're protecting the data for more than 1 year. And for that, we use AWS Deep Glacier. Also with infrequent access, we pass on that savings. It's mostly for large media files which do not get accessed very frequently. We pass on at least 50% of that cost benefit back to the customer.
Excellent. And what about protecting VMware workloads? Can Druva help with that?
Yes. So we protect and the business case or the customer case that I was referring to, we protect data across VMware, both on-premise as well as cloud. So it's a single pane of glass. You can use VMC, which is VMware Cloud on AWS, as well as your on-premise. And you just need to install a proxy, a backup proxy, and everything is controlled then from your cloud-based console.
Nice. And so with Druva being all software, I would assume that it's easy to get started or easy to do like a proof of concept?
Yes. And in fact, that's the best thing. We have customers, who deployed the first virtual machine within 15 minutes and it started backing up. So the ease of managing and deploying is easy, and you don't even have to provision any hardware. You don't even need to do capacity planning. You just need to access the console, and within 15 minutes your first VM backup would start.
Nice. And then if you did need to do a restore, what about egress charges? I know that always comes up when people talking about bringing data back from the cloud.
We don't pass on that cost to the customer. We own that cost. So it's just one bill that you'll get that includes everything.
Nice. And then can Druva help with protecting SaaS applications in any way? There's a question here about that. Yes, we do. There's a lot of SaaS applications that we protect. Any specific SaaS applications that you're referring to? And just to add, we protect Office 365, G Suite, Salesforce, and even Slack. Excellent. And then, so, I know we talked about disaster recovery, backing up data, and bringing it back. But what about if, say, the on-premises location is destroyed? Can Druva help to bring up those applications and actually run them in the cloud? Yes.
So with the disaster recovery solution, you can fail over your virtual machines and applications into your into customers' AWS account within a matter of minutes. So it's just a one-click operation. Once you know that there's a disaster in your physical site, you come to the Phoenix console and just click for disaster recovery, and all these VMs would be failed over from the latest backup copy to the AWS account.
Very nice. And so before we go, if people wanted to get started with Druva, what do you recommend?
I think ease of use and the cloud-first strategy, that is our binding principle. I think we are moving towards cloud, so that's our USP.
Very nice. And so for more information on Druva, of course, check out druva.com. And there's also the DXP, the upcoming Druva Cloud Protection Summit. I encourage everyone to check that out and register for that. Jude, thank you so much for being on the event today. Great presentation.
Most welcome. Thank you, everyone.
For more information on Druva, visit the Handouts tab as well. It's there that you can download the Druva solution brief on building an innovative cloud disaster recovery plan, best practices, tools, and templates. So make sure that you check out that resource and peruse it or read it after the event today. And now it's time for our next prize announcement. We have an Amazon $500 gift card going to Naveen Kopaka from Georgia. Congratulations, Naveen from Georgia. And our next grand prize, a Microsoft Surface Pro tablet going to Michael Proskia from Texas. Congratulations, Michael Proskia from Texas. And with that, it's time for our next presenter on today's Cloud Strategies and Solutions Megacast. I'm excited to introduce Francisco Carvalho, Senior Solution Architect at OutSystems. Francisco, are you there?
I'm here. Thank you very much. David, can you hear me okay?
Yes, sir. Thanks for being on. Take it away.
Thank you very much. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for attending this event. Very excited to tell you about OutSystems. So let me just go ahead and jump in. So OutSystems is a company we started in Europe, to be more exact, Lisbon, Portugal, 20 years ago. And it was about the spirit of, the founders of OutSystems were frustrated with the constant delays of application development, the overtime, the over budget, all of that frustration. So they set themselves to create a platform that can really accelerate development and allow companies to once again get back on track in development. And it is phenomenal that there's no time more important than now to really get back to getting through your backlog and get your applications in the digital transformation. And as we add more channels to it, even more important it is. So we've been in 70 countries now, over 70 countries. We work across over 20 industries with over 340 partners with a large community of 300,000 members. In 2018, we received some funding from KKR and Goldman Sachs that really helped us get this expansion, worldwide expansion, and get more of attention from top companies on the value of our platform and low-code development to really help companies go through their digital transformation journey and move it on to the cloud. And some of those companies, now this is not a comprehensive list of all the companies that use OutSystems, but it really represents the brand recognition. Large companies like across all industries, insurance, banking, automotive industry, semiconductors, use OutSystems for a lot of their development and their digital transformation. So we've really become a leading platform for the low-code and multi-port experience development. But don't just take my word for it. That's what Gartner tells us. So we are a multiple experience development platform, as well as the leaders in that quadrant, as well as the leaders in the low-code application platform. Forrester also ranked us as leaders in the software development and application development. So really strong positions in the market today. Now, if there is one thing I want you to take away from this talk, is these 3 points. So, why should you be looking at a low-code platform, and more specific, why should you be looking at OutSystems? It really is about building fast, build right, and build for the future. Now, I came from a developer background. Before I came to OutSystems, I worked in multiple industries across across various countries, very large to very small companies. And one of the things I've always seen is that the struggle to really build applications fast. It's not so much just the fact of team productivity. It's the challenges that many times those projects developers are faced with, right? I've worked in projects that require developers from multiple systems to help build those applications. And oftentimes it's very difficult. If you think from a leadership perspective, if I have an initiative that I want to create a mobile application, but then my resources, the majority of my resources that are available are, let's say, legacy developers, they're not going to have that skill set to be able to help me on that project. So OutSystems helps you level the playing field, where now it doesn't matter which platform were you developing in the past, now you have this ability to develop applications across all the channels. So you narrow that gap, that skill gap that you may have in your organizations, and by doing that, now you can build applications faster. You can also build them right, because oftentimes if I'm depending on different teams, and if those teams have competing priorities, maybe the options that they're going to give me for that project may not be the ideal. I've been in projects where I needed some data from a back-end system, legacy systems to which I did not have the skill set to go and code in COBOL or RPG, but I needed data from there. So what they do is they give me a dump of the data that then I put in a SQL Server. Well, that's not really the best way to build an enterprise system, right? And soon enough, I'm going to run into this problem of trying to extend it, that application. So I'm not building for the future. I'm not building it right. But if I have this ability to use a platform that can give me access to all those legacy systems and I can get the data myself, or if I have those legacy developers that they also work in the same platform that I am, then we're all collaborating and we're all building the solution that is built right. So, and that's the only way. If you build it right, then you build for the future, because you can easily make changes, and this is more of a cycle, right? And the next version of the development is going to be, again, faster. It's going to continue to be right, and it will continue to be for the future. So how do we do that? So here's the platform, and this is the things that I'll be talking to you in more detail today. And hopefully, if I have a little bit of time, I'll give you a demo on the platform. So it's about these 4 pillars, but I also want to mention what's down here at the bottom. It is a platform that's scalable, is secure, and is performant. We have several compliance, ISO, SOC 2, Type 2 compliance. So it is a secure platform. It is scalable. We have very large organization users with millions of users and getting millions of records, and so very scalable platform. But let's talk a little bit more on the details at the top. So it's a full stack, and what I mean with that is that all the layers of your application development will be done using a visual development environment. So the data model, the logic, the processes, the UI, all of it, I'm using this drag and drop visual tool that allows me to very quickly build applications. So I no longer have to worry about, when building my logic, if I need to know Java or RPG or Node.js. It's all abstracted from me or from the developers. Now, it's very important, as I mentioned, as you engage in a digital transformation, and especially if you're looking at the modernization of your legacy systems, to really look at how can I reach those systems. And OutSystems provides you with this ability to integrate with them, a lot of integration capabilities, not just the REST and SOAP APIs that most platforms provide you, but we also have connectors that allows you to access cloud services like Salesforce or other cloud platforms that you may have, but also enterprise systems that you may have in your organization. We have connectors for SAP, for example, and also connectors for your databases, Oracle, SQL Server, MySQL, but even a connectivity to DB2 on the mainframe. We have a connector for that. Now, besides that, We also provide you with a Forge, and the Forge is a repository of open source components that allows you to extend the development, accelerate the development, because other members in the community have created certain solutions that now you can reuse. For example, I may want to get a Google Maps or a Google Place in my application. I don't need to go and build all that and go and figure out the API works from Google. I can just go and consume this component that OutSystems makes available to me, and very quickly I can get that functionality in my application. Same thing for DocuSign, Adobe Sign, even connectors for cloud services. For example, if I want to get cognitive services from Azure or use TensorFlow in my applications, I can find those connectors on the Forge and very quickly build that functionality into my application with low code by dragging and dropping. Now, obviously, applications, companies have some compliance and some governance around the deployment of applications, and OutSystems makes it very, very easy that the governance and the deployment, basically all that DevOps aspect of the development. So when you are ready to move your applications from dev to QA to production, we have a one-click publishing that allows you to build those deployment plans and push the application across those environments. You can tie security around, so maybe you have a different team that is responsible for a move from dev to QA, but you have someone else that's responsible for moving from QA to production. We also do all the dependency checks to make sure that your deployments are going to be successful, that there's nothing missing there that may break your functionality when you are pushing something into production. So dependency check is something that's baked into the platform. And all the analytics, so being able to see how my application is performing and see where the big catches are. So maybe I have some integration that's slowing down the overall experience of the application that I need to address, or maybe I have business process that it is getting stuck because of some manual process taking too long to get achieved. So analytics helps me identify those bottlenecks and then being able to address and feed all that feedback into the application development lifecycle so I can continue integrating, continue developing, continue building the application. Now, when you build functionality in OutSystems, so let's say, for example, that you are building a mobile application and you call some an integration into your backend legacy system to get the balance of the account, and you make that available in your mobile application. Now, let's say you want to provide that same capability in a chatbot, or even better in a Alexa skill asset. OutSystems makes it very, very, very easy. So not only are we agnostic of the channel, as new channels emerge, it becomes very easy to expose this functionality that I already have built in to those new channels, allowing me to create these brand new experiences to my customers without having to start from scratch. And one of the things that's very important, sometimes overlooked, is the importance of that this experience needs to be consistent regardless of channel, right? I don't want to have to log into the web to get some information to which I'm not able to get it consistently on my mobile device, right? So being able to provide the same experience consistently across all the channels is imperative for the customer satisfaction. Now, before I jump into the demo, one of the things that I want to encourage you is to go to outsystems.com, and you have an option to sign up for a free trial. The free trial does not expire, so you don't have to rush into, in the 30 days that you're going to run out of time to learn the platform and investigate the platform. So go to outsystems.com, click on the sign up for free or start for free, and you get your own cloud provision that you can start building some applications. And it's basically the same functionality that you would get on the enterprise level. So we're not really robbing you of much of the experience. It's just not going to be the same type of performance. It's the shared environment versus the environment that would provision to you will be a dedicated environment. But please try that. It's very exciting technology. Now, without further ado, I want to move very quickly into the demo. And I trust you can see my my screen. And right now I'm in what we call the Service Studio. This is our ID. This is how you do that visual development environment. I'm going to go ahead and start a new application. I'll just provide me some templates as to which type of application I want to build. This is just so it creates the initial template. So if I build an application, let's say for a tablet, it will be also rendered appropriately for a mobile application. It's not like I need to do 2 different applications. It's just providing a template that is going to provide different type of real estate. So let's start with a reactive web application. This will be a responsive web application. Let's say I want to create a store application. So I can open a little, put a little logo over here of my application, so it helps me start the initial branding. However, later on, I can do far more sophisticated styling into my application. And then I can start defining the modules for my application. Now, it's very important to create applications that they are modular, that I'm separating the services from the UI, because that promotes reuse, and later on I can use a lot of these components for my next application that I build, and then I get even more speed in development. Now, remember, we were talking earlier, I was talking about the full stack visual development environment, where I separate the data, the logic, the UI, and the processes. That's basically what I see represented over here. So let's start by building some data. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to grab this Excel spreadsheet that I have over here. You can see I have some customer products and shipping companies, and I'm going to drag that into my platform. And what OutSystems basically does, it grabs those worksheets, and it's going to create my data model. Now, this would have been similar experience if I brought data from, let's say, an external database. I would be able to see those tables represented over here. Or I could create my own data model manually over here. But for the purpose of the demo today, just to move a little faster, that's what I did. So I can see the tables. And one of the things that OutSystems did also is that they looked at the data and determine what is the appropriate data type that needs to be used for that data. So that way, very quickly, I don't need to worry about how to model my application. He understands the data, and therefore represents this properly. You also create what we call the CRUD actions, right? The create, retrieve, update, and delete operations to the database. So I don't have to be worried about how I'm going to write those SQL statements or how I'm going to get into the data. So he abstracts that complexity from me and creates those actions that then I can invoke them from my flow if I wanted to operate on the data itself. So the next thing I want to show you is I'm going to scaffold some of these data. Basically, I'm going to create screens that allows me to look, for example, at the customer data. So if I drag and drop this customer table into my UI canvas, what happens is OutSystems, again, another accelerator, looks at that data and it creates the appropriate UI that will allow me to see the list of all the customers and also the detail for each one of the customers. If I want to add a new customer or I want to edit a specific record, then I'll be able to do that. And I can see that how the flow of the data occurs from those screens, right? So this is called the main flow, which allows me to see, have a snapshot of all the screens that this application has. And if I double click on each one of these, so I'm just going to open this customer one, it created a lot of functionality, the navigation, representing the data in the table with links for me to open the record, the ability to search and create new records. So it provides a lot of functionality, but I'm not tied to just these functionality. I can add my own UI elements to these screens. So for example, let's say I don't want to have the country. It doesn't make sense to have that over there, so I can come over and delete it from my UI, and then I can come back and say, you know what, I want to get the address. And when I drag and drop, I can decide exactly where do I want to represent that into my table. Maybe I want to have the phone and put the phone at the end. So I can build the UI and I can build pixel perfect UI. It gives me full control as to how I want the data to look like. So for example, let's say I would like to also add an extra column over here at the end. So let's put it at the end. That will allow me to have a little button that allows me to delete the record. So I can just drag and drop an icon. And you can see over here that I have a very large library of components that OutSystems already built for me. So I don't have to go and build all that complexity of technology that usually is involved on traditional development, right? So usually these dynamic components requires HTML, JavaScript, and then I have to think about all the JavaScript that is compatible with specific browsers and specific platforms. OutSystems abstracts all of that from me, right? So now I can add a link into my screen. So when I click in this little trash can, I want to be able to open, to go ahead and delete a record, that specific record. So if I come over here, I added basically a screen flow, a screen action, and now I want to call this action delete. So I'm going to delete that record. So when I when I click on that record, I want to delete it. Now, the way I implement the logic, or the traditional way of saying that the way I write the code, is in these flows, in these logic flows. So remember I mentioned about those CRED actions? Well, let's say I want to call one of them the delete one because I want to delete that record. So I just drag and drop that action into my flow, and now it's asking me, okay, which record do you want to delete? And I say I want to delete the current customer ID, so the current row that I'm in. And then OutSystems also helps me with the development. When I hover over the flow and I don't know what to do next, I have this AI-assisted development. And it gives me suggestions. So it's saying, well, maybe if you're going to delete a record, one of the things you should do is refresh the screen so that way it shows the new record was in fact deleted. And then another suggestion would be, show a message to let them know that in fact you deleted that record, right? So this AI development is constantly checking what it is that you're doing, and the model gets smarter and smarter. So then when I'm done, I can go back and publish that change. But before I do that, I want to do one more thing. So let's say that besides creating this UI to see the customer, I also would like to expose this as an REST API, right? So I want to provide that same data source that I have over here, which, by the way, could have been an external database on a mainframe that I'm connecting to, and I would like to expose that data now as a REST API so someone else can consume it in a newer technology. So I can come over here and let's call this, for example, CRM, and now I'm going to create a method that allows me to get all the customers. And so that's the method, and now I also want to allow the return the customer. So once I retrieve that customer, I want to return it to the caller, right? So the customer needs to be a list, so I need to tell the platform that I'm going to return a list. And now I can go ahead and build this flow. Now I want you to note something very interesting. I just built a flow over here that is a flow that when I click in a button on the screen. So this is a logic that's going to execute on a client. Now this get customer service is something that's going to execute on the server, but yet it's the same type of paradigm of development. So I don't need to go and learn JavaScript and then some other server-side technology. I just learn one paradigm of development, one visual development environment, and now I can build all sorts of things. I can build services, I can build client-side logic, server-side logic. This is really where you start leveling the playing field and really building speed in your development. So what I would like to do here, I would like to grab that same table that I rendered on the screen. I'm going to grab it over here into my flow. And what OutSystems will do is actually create, think of it as a query. It gets all the customers from that data source. And then when it gets those customers, I can now assign the results of that data query into my parameter, right? And once I do that, and I just have to say the data source is coming through. So now that's it. I have exposed data as a service, and I can go ahead and click to publish. Now I want you to notice over here there's this green button, and when I click there, it's performing some actions. And what it's doing is this is when the platform is in fact building the application. It's now creating the services, it's creating the database that I define, those tables that I define, it's creating the code for my web application, my client script, is publishing, is making sure that I don't have any conflicts. So if another version was already on the server, it will tell me about those conflicts. And you're also creating source control of my application. So I know every time I publish, a new version gets released. And now that everything was done and it was completed successfully, that button becomes blue, which means I can go ahead and open the application, see how it performs. And here it is. I can see the records that I brought from Excel. I can click on one of these records and it takes me into the details. And I want you to notice one thing. If I come over here and open the service, remember I also exposed that data as a service. If I open the documentation, I can see what we call the Swagger, right? So this is what I would give other developers in other platforms to be able to consume this service. And if they invoke that, what they will get is what's called a JSON response, right? And the JSON is just basically all the data wrapped into this specific format. And if you look up here, I have this facilities record right here at the top. If I go into my UI and I click in that little trash can and delete it, now A-Link is the top, AC Link is the top record. And if I refresh my REST service, I can see AC Link is now my service. So you saw very quickly, I was able to bring a data source from an external place. It was an Excel, but it could have been a DB2 database on the mainframe, and I was able to expose that data source as a service so I can have other applications or platforms consume that data. And I was also able to build a UI very quickly that allows me to see all that data. I can filter, I can search, I can add new records, and I've done that, and I do not keep track of time, but probably less than 15 minutes. So that is what I have that I want to show you. I'm very excited about the platform and the technology and what we are today and what we can do to help your organization really speeding up the development and help you start renewing your legacy systems, modernizing those legacy systems, and really retool your developers so now they can build anything for any channel very quickly without having to go through months and months of training and learning new technologies. So with that, I'll pass it back to David. I don't know if you have any questions, David.
Absolutely, yeah. Really cool presentation there, Francisco. Love the live demo. Thank you so much for taking time to do that. It just helps us to visualize just how powerful this solution is. So while we take some questions from the audience, I'm going to bring up this poll for everyone out there that says, what additional info would you like about the OutSystems solution? So first question I see here that came in, Francisco, they're asking is about, what are some of the most common apps or use cases that people have built with this? Can you share some maybe success stories around specific applications?
Absolutely. So we see three typical use cases that's very successful. One of them is organizations that they are looking at digital operation activities. So they may have a large shadow IT or a lot of manual activity or a lot of things that they need to really quickly start getting them under some IT governance and and build applications and new and experiences. So that's one way to get started really quick, right? You can get in this platform, you can start building those applications quick. The other one is legacy modernization. Companies that they have tried time and time again, and this is one that gets we have a lot of success stories, where companies have failed in the past, really struggle a lot to do with the skill gap, very difficult to get the folks retrained to build these new modern systems. And once they finally get the skill set, they jump ship and go work someone else. It's very difficult to hire folks that they have, Python or Node.js expertise, React, Angular. So, and it takes a long time to get them up to speed. And once they finally do get up to speed, they leave the company. It's very difficult to retain their talent. So when they start looking at OutSystems, they can see that they can use their talent that they have, and the time it takes to retrain is very short. We're talking about matters of weeks, not months or years. So they can start in these modernization projects very, very quickly, develop very, very quickly. And another thing is that they realize is that because they can take a lot of risks, because the development is fast, so if it's wrong, it doesn't matter. You spend 1 week building, we can throw that away and spend another week doing it right? So you really start innovating a lot, things that you never thought before was possible. So that's the second use case. And then the third one is the user experience, that B2C use case, where, again, oftentimes it was very difficult to get those projects off the ground because, again, the data is in those very legacy systems, very difficult to get things out of there. Again, talent gap is another issue. things oftentimes will end up being outsourced to other organizations that they'll build those initial mobile apps, but then becomes way too expensive to maintain. Or worse yet, you have one team working on the web, another team working on the mobile, and now the experiences were different. Your customers start getting frustrated. So this is another area where we see our customers get very excited because now they are able to build in one platform multiple experiences, consistent experience to their customers, and really bringing that customer satisfaction up.
Excellent. Yeah, a lot of different use cases there. Next question I wanted to ask, they're asking about data sources. So you can develop apps in OutSystems. What sort of data source options do I have to bring in data?
Anything you want. So we have, again, as I was mentioned, from the connectors perspective, you can get data from the traditional databases like Oracle, SQL Server, and DB2 on a mainframe, but you can also integrate with SOAP and REST API, so you can call any sort of cloud service out there. So we also have connectors for Salesforce, SAP, so enterprise systems. So say if you have SAP, you can use the BAPI or OData. And one thing I did not mention, but it's also another capability of the platform, is that we provided what we call the integration builder, which allows you to, that if you need to build something that is very proprietary to your organizations. I have a case of a customer that is in a manufacturing and he wanted to integrate with a piece of hardware to which it was not standard, was something very proprietary that they have. And the platform provides you this integration studio that allows you to extend the platform. So you can go into C# and write a piece of code, use iCode, and write some functionality to interact with that proprietary device, and then expose that as an assembly. That will be another drag and drop component inside of service to do that now I can start using. So that is multiple ways that you can get to data. It's pretty much limitless.
Excellent. And so if people want to get started with this, it looks like you've got a number of training options out there and a free version. Is that right?
That's correct. So you can go to outsystems.com and sign up for the free trial. Again, that will give you, it never expires. You can build applications there. You have, the limit is 2 gigs of data, but if you connect into external databases, you're never going to even reach that limit. So you can use that trial, and then all our training is free. So you can, when you sign up for the free trial, you're also going to have access to the OutSystems Academy and all the courses for web and mobile development, business process development, all of it. It's all free. It's the same training that we use to train our own engineers. So you will get the same experience that we have.
Excellent. Yeah, it sounds like a really, really powerful solution for helping companies get new applications running and migrate legacy applications to a much more modern architecture. Thank you so much again, Francisco, for the demonstration and all the information on OutSystems.
Thank you very much. It's my pleasure.
For more information on OutSystems, check out the link. It's right there in your audience console in the Handouts tab. That'll take you to a form where you can just put in your name and email and try out the OutSystems solution for free for yourself. So make sure that you check that out before you go. And now it's time for our next prize announcement. We have a gift card, $500 Amazon gift card going to Justin Hollis from Texas, and another Microsoft Surface going to Winston Francis from California. Congratulations. Still one more gift card and one more grand prize to give out after our next presentation. And now I'm excited to introduce our next presenters on today's Megacast, welcoming Jared Hensel, Senior Product Marketing Manager, and Marcus Strauss, Senior Product Manager, both at SolarWinds. Jared and Marcus, are you there?
Yes, sir.
Yes,
Excellent.
we are.
Great. Glad to have you. Take it away.
All right. Thank you, David. Okay, a little bit about our company overview. Obviously, most people have heard of SolarWinds, predominantly from the networking space. We're number one in that space, but really we've spent the better 10 plus years now in systems and database, and really starting to get into the cloud side of it. So we're number 3 in the systems management space, 499 of the Fortune 500. So we have everything from the largest enterprises down to small MSPs and mom and pop organizations that just need some monitoring solutions. A little bit more about our portfolio. Obviously, this is kind of a spin on Gartner's ITOM. We kind of call it our hybrid ITOM, where we basically are having application management that spans everything from physical, virtual on-premises to all cloud versions, IaaS, PaaS, and SaaS. Same with database. Obviously, we've got some infrastructure management with the server and storage. Even our networking tools kind of span public cloud with some of our NetPath performance. And obviously, we've got some service desk and security appliances. But really what I want to focus on with this topic is for database performance monitoring. So what this tool is designed, it is a SaaS platform. So cloud-born, cloud-bred. So essentially, as people are moving to the cloud, as applications are getting shipped to the cloud or created in the cloud, we wanted to have a solution for those databases that power those applications. So this is a SaaS platform. And so basically you sign up for a subscription essentially. And what we're able to do is pull back your database and system health, including availability and performance. It doesn't matter if it's a virtual machine hosted by Rackspace or anybody like that, or it could be AWS, anything along those lines, or Google or anywhere along those lines. We can pull all those databases back into DPM and monitor it. It is an open source database platform, so what we're doing is monitoring Postgres, MySQL, Redis, and those types of databases. With it being cloud native, really where we see our niche, or where we've gotten a lot of use cases on the development side of the house. So we've got developed leading features in here, such as before and after time comparisons. So as people are pushing code, deploying code, making changes, they're not always aware of how that is impacting the database. So we're providing the ability to kind of do before and after and show you, hey, you've now doing this change, changed your compute, changed your RAM, you have more queries, things along those lines. So again, you can associate your costs with that, going, hey, I've pushed code, I've done an update, but now I see this, more resource consumption, I've got more queries, they're performing slower. Obviously, this is going to now affect my bill with whatever provider I'm using. With that said, another use case is the query analysis, seeing that over time. So again, a lot of people go to the cloud to quickly spin up an application. I can test it real quick. I can do it without many people paying attention, anything along those lines. But again, over time, these are now going to become operational applications and standard, applications you need to monitor. So you're going to be able to see your query analysis over time and track that through. And again, correlate that to cost, performance, and usage. And again, you've got your standard things, automated alerting, obviously customizable dashboards. And a question we get asked quite often is, since it is cloud, we are GDPR and SOC 2 compliant. So again, your data is not going to be out in the ether floating around for everybody to see. Some of what sets DPM apart, because obviously SolarWinds, we already had a database program called Database Performance Analyzer, but that was predominantly used on premises. Obviously, you can monitor a database that was in the cloud, but majority of them were on premises. So, what sets this apart from that tool and others out there? We're seeing everything the database does, from query execution to internals to system resources, all in a single screen. So again, you're getting more context, more visibility into what is going on, how my query is driving usage, where that query is coming from, things along those lines. Again, from vendor tools, or we're pulling in multiple databases in a single platform. So you're not just confined to, okay, hey, I'm using AWS, so I have their OEM tool, and all I can do is see their databases. We don't care where that database is at or what it is. We can pull them all in there. Another thing is the 1-second granularity. With that kind of level of detail, you, as a practitioner, are able to spot these small blips in performance, be alerted on these small blips of performance if you choose, to start being very proactive in your tuning and optimization and get out in front of problems and really drill in. We're not doing a 5-minute average of an average where you're just like, oh, it looks fine. Well, I didn't realize that it was really high for 2 minutes and nothing for 3 minutes, so it averaged to less than 50%. So really that 1 second granularity is a differentiator. We also know that, myself included, I've had to tend to a database and not be a DBA. So we have specific recommendations in there and intelligence to let you know, hey, here's some low-picking fruit you can do to your database, things that you're missing, indexes, or anything along those lines that really help you set the stage for, okay, hey, I've got a solid foundation. Now how do I add to it and things like that? And as I said before, the time comparison, again, is much more developer leaning, or at least the use case is to show, hey, here's what it was an hour ago. I want to see what the change was, to go, hey, we answer that question, what changed, and now I can go back and fix it. Obviously, databases are the heart of every application. Who's using it? You have everything from developers to DBAs to engineering managers to sysadmins. Everybody, they all may not have their hand exclusively in the database, but in some way, shape, or form, their role, their responsibility is contingent on that database performance. So again, we sell to all types of people, all types of users are using the tool and getting value out of it. As I alluded to earlier, it's specifically designed for open source databases. Again, we have found that, with being cloud native and, really servicing that market, a lot of our customers, or majority of them, are, predominantly using open source databases. That's the way they're getting some cost savings, things along those lines. So, we have MySQL, Postgres, Mongo, Aurora, and Redis. So again, it doesn't matter if that database is in a VM, if it's in Google, if it's in Azure, if it's in AWS. We're able to pull all of that information back and show you. Oh, and as Vitesse as well. That was a recently added database. I think the best part of these is obviously the demo. So I'm going to kick it over to my colleague Marcus, who's going to give you guys a dog and pony show of the product, and feel free to ask any questions along the way. Marcus.
Thanks a lot, Jared. So let me share my screen. Okay, I hope everyone can see my screen. So
yes, we can, or at least I can.
Perfect, and I hope that my connection will last, because I'm coming to you from the sunny Ireland through a cell phone connection. So one of the points Jared made earlier on, especially around the ownership of the infrastructure, and especially when we start looking at shifting database workloads to the cloud, some of that ownership shifts with that workload, especially once we start looking at database as a service setups. So, for example, one of the things that I've come across many, many times in the past, and I'm sure a lot of you in the audience have as well, is when we deal with database as a service, for example, and we work with cloud platform providers like AWS or GCP or Azure, when we start seeing bottlenecks, we got to be able to provide the cloud platform provider some idea of where things are starting to go wrong, because in a lot of cases, we may or may not own or have control over the infrastructure behind. So one of the things I kind of wanted to start out with was, for example, showing some of the more cloud platform provider related stats that we do collect. So we do integrate directly with AWS in this example here for CloudWatch related stats, and we do the same, for example, with GCP, where we integrate with Stackdriver, because obviously the understanding has to be, we got to be able to correlate all of these metrics. And what DPM differentiates itself to some of the other providers in the market is that we take essentially a top-down approach from a query perspective, right? Everything that we look at starts out from the query perspective, and we have to have the ability to correlate that back to whatever is the driving factor, whether that's resources, like in this case when we look at memory consumption or CPU utilization and things like that. We still, and as you see, as I move my cursor along the various charts, all of the other related metrics change with it. So I get a very, very good idea of how these correlate to each other. Now, we currently look at an hour view here, and it spans all of my environments in my test environment, so that's 53 hosts in this case. But I could easily just narrow this down and say I would like to just have a look at all of my MySQL hosts, and all of the changes then essentially become based on this filter. Let me remove that again just to make it a little bit broader. And we capture not only the CloudWatch data. These are the golden signals. That's your general database health, your latency, throughput, concurrency, and things like that. And then we have the first glimpse into what I've mentioned earlier on in terms of the way we look at workloads starts essentially from the query and essentially moves downwards in the stack from there on. So we can see here the total queries by time and count, and like Jared mentioned earlier on, recommendations, right? A lot of time our customers spend is in the profiler. And that's simply because of the fact that it's a very easy way for us to understand the impact of particular queries on the overall environment. There are several different ways I can filter that data. The standard filter that I'm using here is essentially I'm just looking at the 30 top queries in terms of total wall clock time spent in my environment. And I can very easily drill into these. We do collect the query digest, and we can see them here. And we remove all of the literals out of that and provide a query digest. And again, we can very easily check these and have a look whether we have any outliers and what other metrics we have collected. Now, in this particular case, and especially again with view of what we see in general with the migration into the cloud, in a lot of cases, that also means we are spreading workload across several different instances. So in our case here, this particular query gets executed against 3 different hosts. And that's a fairly common setup, right? I mean, we generally tend to start using more clustered environments, more distributed environments, and we need to, because it makes our services better. It makes the products that we deliver to our customers better and faster. But it also provides an additional level of complexity in terms of understanding, is what we've rolled out as performant as we think it is? And we can quickly look here, the total time spent. We spent 51% of our time this particular query spends is on one particular host. Now we can also have a quick look and see what the breakdown in numbers is. So for example, if we were to see that 90% of our time is spent on API 2, but the distribution is still 33% on each, then we know that API 2 has a problem in terms of its ingestion capability and how good it essentially processes the query, and then we can drill that back into environmental issues potentially, right? So going back into the profile overview, one of the points that Jared made as well was essentially the developer focus, right? So, and again, going to the I suppose cloud native deployment, a lot of that is essentially we deploy code on a single day basis, right? Every day, sometimes multiple times a day. And one of the things that we have borrowed from the application performance monitoring world is change markers. Change markers are a very common occurrence within the app stack and application performance monitoring world. When you start applying that to the database world, you can essentially start looking at things like, when was my last deployment, and what potentially did that have in terms of impact, right? Let me increase that to probably a 3-hour range, because I think we're just at the top of the hour where we've got some deployment happening. And again, given this is a demo environment, it's a fairly regular scheduled deployment. So we've got essentially 3 deployments here, and we can start looking at whether there's been any outlier since the last deployment, or whether we've seen anything in particular. And I can very easily just drag over one particular part and start looking into this time frame. You can see our deployment here is bang in the middle, and we can have a look whether there is any outliers based on that. And we can start then comparing this to the previous hour, and we get an idea of how did the query perform the hour beforehand versus how it performs now, right? Again, this allows us to have a very, very quick overview of where is the biggest change in the environment, and how can we tackle that? And again, given the distributed nature of how we deploy in SaaS native, cloud native environments where, create and destroy cycles are very, very quick. It's very easy to create more instances of something and potentially start wasting resources and money with that. It's very important to be able to see what's actually causing any potential performance increase, and how can you essentially stop that without throwing the proverbial money at the problem, right? Without understanding where the problem essentially resides. Same goes for if we were to want to look at essentially what's new in the environment. There's very quick and easy ways to identify what is a new query. And we can see that this particular query, as it happened, only appeared after the last deployment. So again, that kind of ties back to what I was saying in relation to being able to tie changes in the environment to specific events, in this case, an application deployment. We can quite easily see that this query was deployed at this time, and we can see it started accumulating traffic around here. So this is a new query. We can extend this into more the everyday housekeeping of databases, right? We can have a look and widen this duration a little bit. We're going to say, I'd like to have a look at all queries that have missing indexes. Let me remove the change marker here, make that a little bit more visible. We can have a look and see which queries have missing indexes, right? Just to give us an idea, where do we have the low-hanging fruits that can save us cycles, right? Because all of these things, once we start looking at the impact, and once we start looking at essentially doing things like full table scans, that's expensive. That's resource expensive. And in an environment where you potentially have a fully distributed elastic setup, any of these additional expenses, if not captured early on, will be captured at the monthly bill when it comes from the likes of AWS or Microsoft or Google. When the monthly bill rolls in of the resources that were consumed, that's the latest point when you want to figure out that there has been something that was expensive, right? So the ability to understand where in the environment resource-intensive and expensive queries live becomes an integral part of making sure that you can keep resource consumption and therefore cost at a fairly monitored level, and to understand quickly where there are potential improvements. Like in this particular case, we do have a sample here. We've got the explain plan here. We've also got a recommendation here that essentially tells us, well, we are using queries not necessarily created in the most efficient way. In this case, it's a limit without an order by, right? But it also tells us we do full table scans, and it tells us how many rows actually have to be examined for that query to finish, right? So certainly not the most cost-effective query. And again, when we take this one further and we start looking at some of the more specific dashboards, we have a whole host of dashboards that allow you to essentially, watch very specific. Well, in this case, obviously, that's the way it works in demo environments. I don't have any data here, right? But again, it's very specific in terms of tracking your cloud deployment, timing, resources, and resource consumption, right? Again, let's see if we have something for this one here. We do. And I'm conscious of time, so I'm kind of going to start wrapping up. We could spend the next couple of hours going through various different metrics that we collect. But I hope that the point that we were trying to bring across with this is that you need to have the right toolset in order to monitor your cloud deployment, and in order to make sure that you get the best out of the provider that you have, and also not essentially end up potentially running the risk of overpaying for consumption that you could have potentially changed, right? And with that, I will stop my demo and try to figure out how I can stop the screen share. Here we go, and give it back to Jared.
Awesome. Thank you, Marcus. I believe we're coming up on Q&A. So, David, I don't know if there's any Q&A, and I think there was a poll question as well.
Absolutely, yeah. Great presentation, Jared. Really cool demo, Marcus. Love the user interface on that. I've just brought up the poll question that says, what additional information would you like about the SolarWinds Database Performance Monitor? And we'll leave that up for everyone out there. I want to call your attention to it. We got a lot of feedback, Marcus and Jared both. Let's see, Andy, Gina, Alex, Guillermo, George all said nice demo, really cool user interface. Renee said, I love SolarWinds. I love to hear that kind of feedback out there. We do have, let's see, a question here from Brian. I see immediately that pops up, and he's asking does it show under queries the execution plans, and if, when, where those plans might have changed within a certain period of time? And then second piece of that was it shows the missing indexes tab. What does that show to a user?
So let me start off with the first one. We do capture the execution plan. We do not capture a change over time on the execution plan. That's really more on you can capture the change over time on a query, but not necessarily on the actual execution plan itself. On the second part of the question, the missing indexes part is essentially, it's part of the best practices really. It shows users which queries that are currently running in the environment don't have indexes. And out of experience, and that goes for most of the DBMSs out there, you know that any query that does not utilize indexing is potentially very expensive, both from a time perspective. It takes very long because it needs to do full table scans in order to figure out where the data sets are, but also potentially very performance intense, right? Because again, it needs to go through doing full table scans. I hope that answers those two questions.
Absolutely, yeah. Great info there. Next question I see, I know you mentioned this, but it would be good to clarify, what databases are supported and can it monitor databases running in the cloud?
So yes, we do support essentially MySQL, Postgres, MariaDB. We do MongoDB. Vitess being a MySQL essentially distributed deployment architecture. It is still MySQL under the hood, but there's a lot of additional layers that come with Vitess. That's why we kind of listed as a separate entity. We do have both agent-based and agent-less monitoring. So to go to the cloud-based question, yes, we can. So if it runs on an instance like EC2 or something like that, then there is the option of an agent-based installation. If it's a database as a service like RDS and things like that, there is an agent-less version of that, which essentially allows for querying of the databases directly and collects the data from there. And there are several other ways. In AWS, we can do network mirroring and do TCP sniffing and a lot of other really cool things. But I think by and large, those two options are the most used options.
Excellent. Excellent. And then kind of what's the architecture behind this? Where does DPM run?
DPM runs natively in AWS. It's a essentially multi-tenanted architecture. And essentially we've built the environment in such a way that it scales and to a degree auto scales with our customers. Most of our very heavy lifting, and without giving away too much, most of our heavy lifting in the time series space lives in a completely separate environment. So we've built essentially the product to scale within the AWS environment together with the customers essentially.
Excellent. And then what about notification options? Kind of what's available around that?
Yeah, so alerts can be set. It's usually standard notification options like PagerDuty and things like that, or via email. There is an API that can be used as well. So if there is an integration, for example, that we currently don't support in-app already directly, there is a way to essentially do the same thing via direct API calls, and especially that kind of holds true for a lot of in-house built applications that are used where we don't have a direct integration, but we also support all of the standard integrations.
Nice. And then this question here comes from Edward. He's asking, how many people do I need to do the install and training?
It's actually because it is, cloud native SaaS based. It's a very small agent. If we were to go with an agent based installation, it takes about 5 minutes to do, and that is it. You're pretty much done. We do offer internal trainings and things like that, but it is by and large very self-explanatory and very quick to set up.
Excellent. And then kind of what's the licensing model around this?
We license by instance. So by instance monitors, that's the licensing model.
Okay. And so there's a question here. Can this help me to compare the performance, say, from one database to another or from one table to another?
It certainly can. It depends a little bit on the use case in terms of one database to another is a broad spectrum. But a lot of our customers, for example, use that as part of their migration process, right? So if you were to have, let's assume a MySQL instance that currently runs on-prem, or even a MySQL instance that runs on EC2, and you are thinking about doing a migration to RDS, a lot of customers use DPM to understand the performance pre-migration and post-migration by looking at specifically that particular instance or that particular query set. We use tags, so customers can tag a subset of queries, and that's an easy way to kind of identify. We don't really work on a by table level, but tags are a way to essentially identify all of the queries that hit that particular table, and you could conceivably then just compare those queries with each other.
Nice. And so could this help to improve the coders and the code by telling them, hey, that's not a smart query, redesign that, make that more efficient?
Absolutely, yeah. And I mean, I think a lot of people understand that when you write code, in a lot of cases, people are actually not writing the query themselves. It's a library of sorts in most cases, right? So when we write apps, it's usually the library that will auto-generate the queries based on a subset of information that somewhere are in the app that we're writing, and then the code gets pushed out. The thing with those libraries is they're not necessarily the most efficient way of creating queries. They're certainly very stable and it works, but they're not very performance-oriented. So things like identifying which queries are new after a code deployment is one of the ways to understand what does that query look like. And then, if you combine that with the query recommendations that we provide, that gives the developer a good starting point in figuring out, okay, maybe I need to look at what that query was that got generated and maybe manually change it, add a couple of things to make it more performant.
Excellent. And so what's the easiest way to try out DPM or get a kind of a proof of concept up and running with this?
Well, we do have a free trial. It's 14 days, and I know Jared has links in his presentation in the last slide. You can navigate onto the SolarWinds website. There we go. And essentially just sign up for the trial. That's all it takes, and you get 14 days. It's full coverage, right? So you can use the product to its fullest extent and start, having a look and seeing that it, provides the savings and the insights that you need.
Excellent. And I should mention for everyone out there in the audience, those links on the screen are actually clickable links. If you just mouse over those, you can click on any one of those. It'll open a new tab or a window in your web browser, and you can sign up for the free 14-day trial of the SolarWinds Database Performance Monitor. Jared and Marcus, really great presentation and demo. Thank you so much for being on.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
And thank you to SolarWinds. Of course, visit any of the links there on the screen for additional information about SolarWinds DPM. There's also a handout that's available in your audience console that covers the SolarWinds DPM results sampler for additional information. So make sure that you check that out. I'll just leave that up while I do our final prize announcement. We have an Amazon $500 gift card going to Elena King from Washington, D.C. And our final grand prize, a Microsoft Surface, going to Randy Pearson from Oregon. Congratulations to all the prize winners on the event today. We got just a ton of feedback, hundreds of questions today. I see over 400 questions and comments. So thank you so much for everyone's participation on the event today. We love it. We appreciate it. And, thank you so much. Before you go, I want to remind you to check out the 10 on Tech podcast. It's over in the iTunes store. If anyone out there is a potential sponsor of an upcoming Megacast or EcoCast event, and you'd like to chat with us about presenting here, just reach out at connect@actualtechmedia.com. And finally, I hope that you'll join me for an event that's happening tomorrow on building a next generation IT environment with experts from Rubrik and Faction. Going to be a great event. In fact, we'll be kicking it off with a keynote interview that I did with Mr. Bill Clayman just this morning. In fact, he's an author, blogger, speaker from Switch, and you can reach him on QuadStack. He posts all kinds of cool data center IT resources and content that he creates. So hope that you'll join us for that event happening tomorrow with a keynote presentation from Mr. Bill Clayman and experts from Rubrik and Faction. Thank you so much for joining us on today's Cloud Strategies and Solutions Megacast. I hope that you learned a lot. Have a great day. See you next time.